I've given us a few more minutes to enjoy our coffee and socialization, but I think we should get started. Before I give my report, I think it's important that we go around the room and everybody introduce themselves again, including for those who may be on the WebEx so that they know who's around. So I'll start, and I'm Linda Birnbaum, the director.
Gwen Coleman, Director, Division of Extramural Research and Training.
Pat Maston, Deputy Director of DERT.
Iracema, we're introducing. Perfect timing.
Good morning, Iracema Coronado, Arizona State University.
Jose Manatu, University of Connecticut.
Maureen Lichtveld, Tulane University School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine.
Andy Shiradan speaks.
May Ho, University of Arkansas.
Jose Cordero, University of Georgia.
Patrick Song, University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio.
Good morning, Katrina Korfmacher, University of Rochester.
Edith Parker, University of Iowa.
Mike Slimak, Environmental Protection Agency.
Gary Ellison, National Cancer Institute.
Bob Wright, Mount Sinai School of Medicine.
Robert Tanguay, Oregon State University.
Brad Reset, Washington University School of Medicine.
Marla Perez Lugo, University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez.
Lynn Goldman, George Washington University, Milken Institute School of Public Health.
Chris Long, NAEHS Executive Officer.
Good morning, Janet Hall, Clinical Director, NIEHS.
Brian Baird, Scientific Director, DNTP.
Daryl Zeldin, Scientific Director, DIR.
Rick Wycheck, Deputy Director.
Bill Zook, Chief Hazardous Substances Research Branch and Director of Superfund Research Program, NIEHS.
Hi, good morning. Alfonso Latoni, Chief of the Scientific Review Branch in the Division of Extramural Research and Training.
Good morning. Cindy Lawler, Chief Genes Environment and Health Branch.
Good morning, I'm Claudia Thompson, Chief of the Population Health Branch.
Good morning, I'm David Balshaw, Chief of the Exposure Response and Technology Branch.
Good morning, I'm Jenny Greer, I'm Chief of the Grants Management Branch.
And Christy Drew, Chief of the Program Analysis Branch.
Sri Nadadur, Exposure Response and Technology Branch.
Aubrey Miller, Office of the Director, Bethesda.
Kim McAllister, Genes Environment and Health Branch.
Good morning, Kimberly Gray, Population Health Branch.
Kimberly Thigpen-Tart, Office of Policy Planning and Evaluation.
Demia Wright, Worker Training Program.
Kathy Allmark, Worker Training Program.
John Schelt, Office of Science, Education, and Diversity.
Nicole Popovich, DERT, Office of the Director.
Laura Thomas, Scientific Review Branch.
Christy Pettibone, Program Analysis Branch.
A.B. Boyles, Population Health Branch.
Sarah Lukenbuell, Program Analysis Branch.
Tricia Castranio, Office of the Director, Bethesda.
John Balbus, Office of the Director, Bethesda.
Buenos días, Benny Encarnacion, Boyer Office.
Annika Gerlinga, Genes Environment and Health Branch.
Bonnie Joubert, Population Health Branch.
Takara Chamberlain, Population Health Branch.
Amanda Garten, Genes Environment and Health Branch.
Jennifer Collins, Exposure Response and Technology Branch.
Helena Kennedy, Program Analysis Branch.
Heather Henry, Hazardous Substance Research Branch.
Carol Schroeffler, Training and Career Development Programs.
Astrid Haugen, Genes Environment Health Branch.
Mike Humble, Genes Environmental Health Branch.
Dan Shaughnessy, Exposure Response and Technology Branch.
Leroy Worth, Scientific Review Branch.
Varsha Shukla, Scientific Review Branch.
Fred Tyson, Genes Environment and Health Branch.
Chip Hughes, Worker Training Program.
Steve Romero, UIW Health and Safety.
Michael Baker, MDB, NIEHS Contractor.
Good morning. Liam O'Fallon, Population Health Branch.
Chris Weiss, Office of the Director, Bethesda.
Good morning, Jed Bullock, Office of the Director in Bethesda.
Hello, Sheila Newton, Director of Office of Policy, Planning and Evaluation in the Office of the Director.
Lingamanaidu Ravichandran, Exposure Response and Technology Branch.
Arsha Garbani, Program Analysis Branch.
Martha Barnes, Population Health Branch.
Good morning, John Hollander, Genes Environment and Health Branch.
Michelle Heacock, Hazardous Substance Research Branch.
Chris Duncan, Genes Environment and Health Branch.
Alicia Ramsran, Genes Environment Health Branch.
Les Reinlib, Exposure Response Technology.
Janice Allen, Scientific Review Branch.
Danielle Carlin, Hazardous Substances Research Branch.
Thad Shug, Population Health Branch.
Stephen Tuishime, Program Analysis Branch.
Well, thank you, everyone. Now, on the phone, can we please have... Did we miss one table? I'm sorry. Whoops, they're not on. The microphone needs to be on.
Liz McNair, DERT.
Linda Bass, Scientific Review.
Susie Fitzpatrick,
Ernie
U.S.
Hood,
Food and Drug
Report
Administration.
Services.
On the phone now, we'll get in. Susie, we heard you. Let's go to the others.
Okay.
Terry Kavanaugh, University of Washington.
Thank you, Terry.
Sue Shantz, University of Illinois.
Sue, thank you.
Bill Cibola, CDC, ATSBR.
Thank you, Bill.
Anybody else on the phone? I think Simma's on the phone. Simma Finn is connected. I don't know if she's available right this minute, but okay.
So pursuant to the Government in the Sunshine...
Hi, Simma Finn, Population Health Branch.
Better
Thanks,
late than
Simma.
never, Simma. Thank you. Pursuant to the Government in the Sunshine Act, all aspects of this meeting are open to the public except the review, discussion, and evaluation of grant applications and related information, and we have already done that. Dr. Lauren Zeiss is not able to be here today, and we are very pleased to have people on the WebEx as well. So, Gwen?
Okay. So for housekeeping kinds of things, first of all, Tina Powell will assist you with any telephone calls, travel arrangements, or other items. She's outside at the desk, so just let her know if you need anything. I just want to remind everybody that we are webcasting from this location, and it's important that you speak into the microphone when you are speaking, but it's also equally important for you to turn your microphones off so that your side conversations are not broadcast out there. I want to remind us that because of the internet issues, when we have our concept clearance discussions, we'll vote by hand. Also, let you know that we have extra time for lunch because you'll be going out into downtown Durham, many restaurants in the vicinity here. So
You are really lucky.
yeah, giving you a little bit extra time to enjoy the area before we start our session after lunch. So with that, I think I'm just going to go on to consider the minutes, and then Linda will speak. So the minutes were available on the NAEHS Council webpage, and they were also in the electronic council book, and we asked you to review the minutes before you came to the meeting. I want to know if there are any questions or comments related to the minutes. Not hearing any, I will ask for a motion to approve the minutes. Okay, and a second? Okay, got that. Thank you. So all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, and on the phone?
In favor, Kavanaugh.
In favor, Sean.
Okay, thanks very much. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we carried the motion. Just a reminder that all the future meeting dates into 2022 are on your agenda and hopefully on your calendars. And I also want to say thank you to our members who I think this will be your last meeting, those of you who are retiring, and thank you very much for your service, and we'll miss you. Okay.
So good morning, everyone, and I really have a lot to tell you about today, a lot of exciting stuff, some new stuff, and I'm going to go through, starting as per usual with the budget, and I think I actually may have some good news, but as you can see, our budget, since actually our first rise from 2015, we were flat in 14 and 15. As you know, if you go back to ancient history, we were down in 13 because of sequestration.
Hey,
But-
Linda,
Yeah?
can you move closer to the mic and?
Move the
Yeah,
mic.
Thank you.
Because otherwise I can't see. So since 16, we have been getting increases along with the NIH increases of $2 billion, $2 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion, $2 billion, proposed $2 billion, no, forget the president's budget. That's not happening, hasn't happened in a year. You know, the cuts there would have been horrific for NIH and NIEHS as well. But the House mark is another $2 billion increase, and Jed just let me know this morning that the Senate Subcommittee Appropriations mark is a $3 billion increase, which would be phenomenal. We don't know, of course, if that will happen. That committee is actually, the subcommittee is meeting for the markup at 11:30 today. The full committee will be meeting on Thursday. So hopefully by the end of this week, we'll know what it looks like for NIEHS, at least from the Senate. Remember, then the Senate and the House have to coalesce. Many of these years, the House has gone along with the Senate. We'll see whether that happens this year or not. But having the Senate come down with a mark of a $3 billion increase for NIH is very encouraging. It really means that we won't, certainly the $2 billion will go through. And the $2 billion increase for NIH is an increase of $37.8 million, which would be a 4.9% increase, which would be the biggest percentage increase that we've had in the last years while we've been getting this increases. I think one of the things that you're aware of is that the increases in the budget have not been uniformly distributed across NIH. 40 to 50% of the budget has been earmarked for specific programs such as All of Us, Brain, Alzheimer's disease, Cancer Moonshot, and so on. And then the rest of the ICs who weren't participants in that, what was left got divided up proportionally. So if in fact the same thing happens with a $3 billion increase, maybe we'll get an even bigger increase than 37.8 million or 4.9%, and that would be very, very exciting. So anyhow, I think the other important thing, I don't know, Jed, did you hear anything about the Superfund increase, or we won't know that until Thursday, probably? Okay, we won't know this because that's a different committee, and that hasn't met yet. But the House did propose a $1 million increase in our Superfund, which would finally get us to the nice round 80 million. Would we mean we'd be finally above where we were in 2012 before sequestration. We were very close with 79 for FY19, but didn't quite get there. 80 would put us over. Hopefully the Senate will support that or even give us a little bit more of an increase. I guess we don't see the Senate language about the $10 million pass-through that happens every year from the Department of Energy for our worker training program, but we have every expectation that that will happen as well. So I think that's all good news. At least it's very encouraging. And actually I've already kind of told you about this. This all has been able to happen because the budget ceilings were listed, and the president, to I think everybody's pleasant surprise, signed that bill back in August. And basically, not only is it a 2-year budget deal, it does away, it's the end of sequestration. So up until the sequestration, when the bill was passed, could have gone through, including FY21. So that's gone now. And it again lifts the debt ceiling. So this is all good news. As far as what's going to happen September 30th or October 1st when our new budget comes in, the answer is we don't really know, but we do not expect to have a budget We expect that we'll have a continuing resolution. It's unclear how long that resolution will be, whether that will take us into November, or there are some suggestions that we might have a series of continuing resolutions where we would not get a budget until close to Christmas. As you know, that's kind of the way things have been happening for the last umpteen years, other than this past year. However, I think we're hoping that doesn't happen because it's a lot of extra work for our budget people. It's a lot of extra work for planning. Under a continuing resolution, you can't really initiate new programs, and you don't really know where you're going to be. But let's hope. Things, I think, overall are looking good, and I think FY20 will be a positive year. So, to talk about some of the congressional action that we've been dealing with lately, I think many of you, especially if you're in a northern state or you're in a Gulf or an Atlantic state, you are very aware of the problem with hazardous algal blooms. And Representative Vern Buchanan, Republican of Florida, who's been in Congress for about 12 years, actually got something in the House legislation, in the House bill, that would designate $6.25 million of our $37.8 million specifically for hazardous algal blooms. We're pleased to get recognition of our HAB research. On the other hand, that is about double what we have been spending on HAB research. And our Oceans and Human Health program that Fred Tyson leads so ably, we are spending roughly $2.8 to $3 million a year related to HAB research. Whether this persists in the final bill that we get once the Senate and House get together, we don't know. But I think there clearly is a major need. We're having real problems in this country with blue-green algal blooms and with red tide. And the blue-green algal blooms I used to say it was mainly kind of across the northern tier and in some of our northern states, but in fact, right here in North Carolina, we've had lakes that have been impacted by the blue-green algal blooms, and in Florida, Lake Okeechobee actually recently had blue-green algal blooms. Haven't seen as much red tide this year, but these things come and go. So anyhow, I'll be doing briefings for Representative Buchanan in 2 weeks, actually 2 weeks from today. And then also I'm going to be briefing the Appropriations Subcommittee staff, our Labor Age staff, which is our major funder, about this topic. So we think that this is a very, very critical issue. I would say it's one of our emerging issues that we have to deal with and go forward on. Okay, so some other things. This is a really interesting one, actually. So Senator Tom Udall, Democrat of New Mexico, and Representative Alan Lowenthal, Democrat of California, are actually members of a bipartisan commission in Congress dealing with plastic and plastic waste pollution. And they wrote a letter to President Trump on June 5th urging interagency research plan for mismanaged plastic waste. Interestingly, this was directed to Dr. Collins to respond to. You would have thought this might have gone to NOAA or this might have gone to EPA or something, but it was given to NIH to respond to, so of course that meant that it came to us to respond to. And Sheila and Jed and others worked very, very closely to develop a response to the letter. The letter talked about not only the total amount of plastic garbage that exists, and I think you know that there's more and more attention being paid to single-use plastics and what that means, but we talked about a lot of the issues of microplastics and nanoplastics, which are the breakdown products, and you all know about the 400 square mile gyro in the Pacific Ocean, and you see it everywhere. And there seems to be an inverse relationship between the socioeconomic state of an area and a country and the amount of plastic waste pollution that you have. But we talked about all of that, and we talked about the work that NAEHS has done in funding several different meetings related to especially issues of nano waste and microplastics, and highlighted our involvement in the nanotechnology, environmental, and health implications work group and the work that we've done in that area. We'll see whether that letter comes back or there are additional things that we end up having to respond to with that letter. Another issue that we've been dealing with for quite a number of years, and actually Warren Casey and Brian Berridge did a briefing for Representative Kent, actually it was John Bucher, I think, maybe it was before Brian was on board, for Kent Calvert's staff. But he's very involved with and very interested in what ICVAM is doing, and he sent a letter requesting information about NTP's animal testing practices and the work of ICVAM. And the interesting thing is that there is a bill that has been brought up multiple times before Congress called the FACT Act, which would require really ICVAM to keep a list of all the animals that are used in testing. Well, that's not something that we can do in any way because we don't control the pharma industry and how much they use. We don't have controls of what other federal agencies use. For example, USDA is a big user of animals, as is FDA. So that we've been dialoguing with Representative Calvert's staff for several years about this issue. But anyhow, at this point, we were able to respond to him, give him more information on what we've been doing with our move to reduce, reuse, and refine animals, and talked about Tox 21, talked about some of the programs that we're having in that light. So we responded to that. Now, there was a briefing that Brian and John Bucher and Mike Wide, Mike was really the chemical lead for the cell phone radio frequency study, and they were briefed the staff from the Subcommittee on Investigations and Oversight that Representative Eddie Bernice Johnson, Democrat of Texas, chairs. And they really wanted a better understanding not only of what our cell phone study, what the results of that two-year study said, and I think many of you know that that study did show a significant increase in schwannomas of the heart and an increase in gliomas of the brain in male rats that were exposed, as well as a number of other tumors where the increase was, it was hard to say with 100% surety. So there was some equivocal evidence. But the point, what they were really interested in is what's happening with 5G. How does that relate to what was done in this study, where basically 2G and 3G were tested. Now, I'm not an expert on this at all. I've had a couple briefings from Mike and John to try to understand it. My understanding is with 5G, you will still have 2G and 3G and 4G kind of as well as 5G. 5Gs are much lower, let me get this right, lower frequency waves, but everything, they'll be, the 2G, 3G kind of waves will still be present. So try to inform them about that. And we are doing some follow-up studies, looking for more mechanistic information ongoing related to this work. So we'll be doing a congressional briefing again in 2 weeks, the same day that I brief Representative Calvert and, Representative related to algal blooms, and brief the subcommittee on algal blooms. We'll also be having a Friends of NAEHS congressional briefing on the 24th. The Friends involve, for example, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Thoracic Society, American Lung Association, Society for Birth Defects, the Tox Forum, Society of Toxicology, a whole bunch of our different professional supporters out there in the community. And I'll be opening it to kind of give an overview of our children's health research. I should say we do this every year, usually in October, which is Children's Health Month. But we accelerated it this year for scheduling reasons. But Joe Braun of Brown is going to be talking about PFAS and developmental outcomes, and I think many of you are aware that PFAS is an issue that has not only emerged, but is, kind of front and center of concerns right now. And Nadia Hansel of Johns Hopkins is going to be talking about indoor air quality and childhood asthma. So I think you all realize that we are not in Rodbell. I think that's pretty obvious. But if you're over at the Institute, you can see that work is going on at, full steam to modify it. We are going to end up with, I think, a really beautiful new space. We will not have our gorgeous copper walls, which we're busy delaminating and coming apart, but it's going to be a larger space. Instead of only being able to legally, or safely, I should say, sit about 180, we're going to be able to sit over 300 in the new space. And we will also have, safety, for example, the sprinkler system, doors that open out instead of in, and we're going to have some conference room storage space. So for your next council meeting, hopefully, we're hoping it'll be done by mid-February, but it may not be till March. So you'll get to see it soon. Whoops. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about some science advances that we have. First of all, from one NIEHS, which is where we have investigators from different parts, different divisions of NIEHS involved. This is an interesting one showing that microRNA 424 in the placenta appears to be associated with severe preeclampsia. So this offers some opportunities for using this as a biomarker of a problem, say, kind of evolving. And we know that actually preeclampsia has increased pretty dramatically in the U.S. and continues to increase. This is a problem especially in some of our African-American communities. And there is some evidence, for example, that say PFAS are associated with an increased risk of prenatal hypertension, which would go along with preeclampsia as well. Another interesting study is that trying to understand the response to liver injury using a transcriptomic and a benchmark modeling approach. This is some work that's being driven really by some of the NTP efforts, along with some really nice statistical modeling from Pierre Bochel. And what you have here is that looking both, for example, at the different pathways that, for example, and the different kinds of chemicals that you can use, that you can see that the benchmark dose, for example, will increase along with, for example, the different compounds that are used. There were 24 different chemicals used in this, and this kind of just gives you an example comparing, for example, the response to troglitazone, rosiglitazone. These at one point were thought of as diabetic to treat diabetes, and these are ligands of PPAR gamma. And what you can see is how active, for example, that the benchmark dose where you start getting effects are in the nanomolar range, and you can actually identify what, for example, GO pathways are impacted here. So damage response is one of the most sensitive pathways that occurs, and for example, lipid hydroxylation is a little less sensitive, and so on. So these have real potential for trying to understand pathway analysis and using transcriptomic approaches for understanding and for not having to go through full 90-day or even 2-year bioassay kind of approaches. Some interesting work coming out of DIR. This is a really big one that certainly had an impression on me, and this is the study showing using over 45,000 women from the sister study, and these are, many of you know, I've talked about the sister study before, which is over 50,000 women who are sisters of women who had breast cancer, and this is using over about 45,000 of those women who have not developed breast cancer in the past approximately 10 years. And what was interesting here is that women who report being exposed to artificial light at night, including having your television on in your room while they're sleeping, have an increased risk of obesity in women. I sometimes have my TV on. I'm starting to sleep with a mask and see if that makes an effect. But I think this is a very interesting, and this got a lot of press. Another one here is NFY, which is a histone fold domain protein, is very important in controlling the fidelity of the initiation of transcription of gene promoters through the maintenance of nucleosome depleted regions. If you actually, for example, knock out this response, then you get initiation at many different sites. The nucleosomes basically, you get changes in chromatin structure and stuff, and it's really nice to see. Karen Edelman was a star principal investigator of ours who was recruited away by Harvard a couple of years ago, but Raja Jyothi has been continuing this effort, really trying to study the mechanisms of initiation of gene transcription. And then this third, whoops, I didn't want to forget this one because I think this paper coming out of John Sadlowski's group is a really exciting one. I think I might have talked about the glucocorticoid receptor possibly in last council. But the thing here that's really, I think, is interesting is that in your heart's cardiomyocytes, there's a really important balance between the glucocorticoid and the mineralocorticoid receptor activity. Now, you have some of the same ligands for these two receptors, but in fact, you find that if you knock out the glucocorticoid receptor, you don't get some of the stress-induced problems with your heart. And in the mineralocorticoid receptor, if you knock it out, you get more. And then if you knock both of them out, they seems to do okay. So again, the issue really is the balance between these two. And I think that's actually an issue we should probably be looking at in some other tissues. There was a talk I heard just the other day, I guess yesterday, at the DOHAD meeting in Chapel Hill about placental glucocorticoid regulation. And I kind of said, you know, maybe you want to look at what's happening with mineralocorticoid receptors in that tissue as well. This is an interesting paper. Again, I said PFAS are kind of front and center, at least in the environmental toxicant field right now. But NTP has been conducting a series of 28-day studies on 7 different PFAS, and then they've also conducted a 2-year study of PFOA in rats, in male and female rats. And so they also looked at the toxicokinetics so that they could really understand, you know, how much of the differentials, what appears to be susceptibility, is associated with different pharmacokinetic parameters. And what they were able to show, and I think these are really too small for you to look at in detail, the important thing is that what's called the short chain, which is the 4-carbon perfluorobutyl sulfate, and the 6-chain and the 8-chain, is that these both have very long half-lives in the rat body, and the PFBS has a relatively short half-life. In fact, this is about 3 hours. This is about 20 days. This is about 16 days. In both of these cases, there appears to be male-female difference in where females are excreting it more rapidly, which goes along with what's been reported before with rats with PFOA, but not with PFAS. And PFAS, there doesn't seem to be any sex difference. So kind of complicated what's going on. I think the important thing is that in their 28-day tox studies, they've also shown that they're getting many of the same effects with PFBS as they do with PFHXS and PFOS. You just need a higher administered dose in order to get the same response. And I should say in humans, kind of mimics what we're seeing in the animals, is that the half-life of we don't really have a measure of PFBS in humans, but we assume it's quite short. But PFOS actually has a half-life of, let's say, roughly 3 to 4 years in people, and PFHXS is even longer. Again, and we're seeing something similar in the rats. A couple of some interesting stuff from our extramural community, and I think many of you are aware of lots of press about the dangers of vaping recently. So I pulled out 2 papers here that I think are very, very relevant related to e-cigarettes. And the group at Chapel Hill has done a lot of work showing that some of the flavorings, especially, for example, the different kinds of aldehyde groups, so vanillin and benzaldehyde and so on, are all generating, are really blocking the oxidative burst, and they're impairing neutrophil phagocytosis, so impacts on neutrophils from a bunch of very common. Cinnamaldehyde is one of the most active ones, more so than benzaldehyde, more so than vanillin, and so on. So, you know, all those nice flavored things, especially that teenagers are enjoying inhaling, problematic from this aspect. And then another aspect that we've seen is that the mitochondrial stress response in neural stem cells exposed to e-cigarettes is also severely impacted as well. What happens is the mitochondria, the stress response to mitochondria is you get hyperfusion, and you get reduced survival of mitochondria related to e-cigarette exposures. 2 other studies that I think, one is one, again, and I've talked about this cohort before because I really, really love it. I don't know why my pretty pictures aren't on this one. Anyway, but this is a follow-up of the California Children's Health Study This is the study in which they've recruited 3 cohorts of children in 7 areas of LA. And so one cohort was recruited in about 93 to 95, another cohort 96 to 99, and the third cohort in 2006 to 9. And I think I had shown at another meeting the fact that they'd shown that as the air pollution in Los Angeles has gotten better, in other words, less air pollution, the children in cohort 3 have much better lung function than children in cohort 1, and there's kind of a gradual improvement. And this one is that they're also showing, they're looking at the issue of asthma, and they can actually, we've known for a long time that air pollution can exacerbate asthma occurrence, but in fact they were able to show in this study that it can also be involved with the induction of asthma. So they have many fewer children in the cohort, the most recent cohort, actually developing asthma than they do in the earlier cohorts. Again, the beauty of prospective longitudinal studies that you can follow. And then this is a really interesting one, as we keep stressing the importance of translating the work that we do to get into the health communities. Our BSERP, the Breast Cancer and Environment Research Program, which has been going on since about 2003, is a partnership with NCI. And in this case, NAEHS was really interested in funding some communication science to understand how can we better communicate the roles. And this is actually working related to medical education and helping them understand the communication issues that have to be dealt with related to environmental issues. And then this one I think is especially timely and kind of concerning. A lot of this coming out of some of the work being done at NYU and Mount Sinai. But there's an elevated incidence of prostate cancer from the World Trade Center responders. And this appears to involve a very clear inflammatory cascade. And also, the study was done where they compared prostate cancer from World Trade Center responders to prostate cancers in other people, and they could show that specifically that the dust exposure was associated with this inflammatory response. For example, the OT suppressor cells are up, interferon gamma was up, and both your B cells, for example, and your dendritic cells were increased as well. Okay, so I'm going to give a little bit of a retrospective about some of the exciting things that I think have happened over the past almost 11 years. This is all a different order than I thought I was speaking on, but that's okay. Just want to make sure that I don't forget some of the things I wanted to talk about. But we're going to go through some of these different areas of science that I think were important. So related to strategic planning and science, for example, I think that the development of our strategic plans, which were done through a very open and transparent process involving all of our stakeholders, and when I say that, I do mean all. I'm not only talking about our intramural people or our extramural people, I'm also talking about our press folks, I'm talking about, or the press and the media, I'm talking about congressional and policy folks as well, and other colleagues. And I'm really pleased with how these have developed and how I think everyone in this room can tell you where their work fits into our strategic plan. So far, I'll tell you, I'm better still at telling you that it was, goal 10, for example. With our new, where we have the 3 themes and we have a total of 19 goals, haven't gotten quite as good at those specific numbers, but I think that's important. There are 2 things that aren't, 2 other things that we did, for example, is we basically reformulated how we were running ICFAM in 2013 and made it much more focused on what the regulatory agencies needed. Instead of us telling the regulatory agencies, oh, you've got to develop this new in vitro model, we said, what do you need? What can you use? And this has been, I think, much more successful. Warren Casey has done a brilliant job of bringing this about. And we published a strategic roadmap for ICFAM that came about, that was issued actually in 2018, whoops, that isn't up here, but I was meant to talk about that. But this is also our I would say reconfiguration of our entire IT approach, where we've developed this Office of Environmental Cyber Infrastructure, which is kind of involves bringing together in kind of a matrix management fashion our web science, our high performance computing and scientific computing, our data science, and our enterprise computing. And we've been able to hire David Fargo, who had run our Office of Science and High Performance Computing in DIR to head that office, and they've developed a strategic roadmap going forward. Two other things that I had wanted, forgot, or didn't put up here, which I think were really important. One is I'm really happy with the Office of the Director in Bethesda, because I envisaged that as a boots on the ground kind of place where we'd have someone available to respond, to participate in all the different meetings that occur, not only in Bethesda, but with other government agencies. So I want to say that Aubrey, Chris, John, and Jed have done a phenomenal job. They have a couple of people who work with them, but they've done a phenomenal job in that office. And then the other thing that I'm really pleased about is that we reestablished the Division of the National Toxicology Program as a freestanding intramural research division, not part of the Division of Intramural Research. It has a very different mission. It's a program-solving problem, not necessarily a basic science problem, a program, and I'm happy that we've done that. Some of the areas of science, and again, I think this looks like an old version that's up here because I think we filled in a lot of these other boxes, but I'm really very, very happy. I was the first director to open a clinical research unit on campus, and you know, I think it's great. We are actually, the success of this effort, and I think Jan deserves a lot of the success for the tremendous increase in activity here, but I think we have maybe 23 active protocols. I just read about a new protocol we're starting, which is actually looking at the trajectory really of adolescence and the development of a girl's first period, which is actually the name of this study. I'm going to be recruiting 75 healthy young girls to follow them through that period because it's that time in their life, it's frankly not very well described. So I'm very excited about, again, a number of the different programs that are ongoing here. And we are using the need for really a permanent facility this is 4 trailers hooked together. I will tell you, when we're afraid of a hurricane, we get very worried about this facility, but we're using this along with the need for a computational science building, so our computational science and clinical center, and we're fairly optimistic that we'll be able to get funding for that within the next couple of years. Some of the important work here is let's see, this is the TOX21 effort, which in 2010, well, it was started in 2008, involved NAEHS and what is now the National Center for Advancing Translational Science Research, NCATS, Translational Science, run by Chris Austin. And then in 2010, FDA joined us in that partnership. And there have been 3 phases, where the first was the testing of almost 10,000 chemicals rapidly, and then there's additional chemicals added to that, and now really trying to look at a subset of genetic responses, about 1,500 different genes that are being looked at, high throughput manner. This is actually pointing out the whole issue of epigenetics and the importance that has, achieved. I will tell you, about 10 years ago, shortly after Francis Collins became director, he called me and said, "What's all this stuff about epigenetics? I don't know anything about it. I don't think this is really important." I think he realizes now that epigenomics is extremely important. That's why a skin cell is different than a lung cell, is different than a hair cell, and everything else. This is actually, obviously, some of the difference in mice, where you have the agouti yellow mouse, which kind of has provided I would say, the impetus for some of the research in this area. What I think I had wanted to also show in this area was our move to begin to incorporate different models of genetic susceptibility and diversity into some of our research, that, using specific inbred strains of mice is fine if you want to ask a specific question. But if in fact you want to get some information on the breadth of the species susceptibility, that may not give you what you want to know. So the development of the collaborative cross and the diversity outbred mouse and working with those, I think, is a really exciting way to go. And I'm trying to remember what this picture at the top of my head with this cute little girl, I think that's some of that, looking at the whole issue of looking at a variety of different toxicants and personal care products and so on. Important. Whoops. Yeah, this is definitely, I apologize. They're trying to put up the new version. Okay, well, we can go ahead. This was some of the emerging issues in disaster research, and what I wanted to get across the point that is our whole effort in this area. NAEHS was involved, for example, in 9/11. We were involved in response to Katrina, but with the Gulf oil spill in 2010, Chip and his group were embedded in incident command within 10 days, 9 days. We had booklets printed within 14 days in Spanish, English, and Vietnamese that could be given to cleanup workers, small booklets that could fit in their pocket or their hip. And then in June, Francis Collins announced at a congressional hearing that he was going to give us $10 million to do a study, a follow-up study of people who were involved in the Gulf cleanup. That study has expanded and continued. There were 2 Institute of Medicine reviews of it, one in June, and then in, I think it was August or September. Lynn, I think you chaired that meeting to actually look at the protocol and involve it. So not only do we have the Gulf study, which is the longitudinal worker follow-up, and worker is kind of a euphemism for anyone who played any role. So you had people who were out, fighting fires, you had people who were booming and skimming the oil, and then you had people picking up tar balls on the beach. So we have a real range of exposure and a range of workers. About 20% women, which I think has been important as we follow up this population. But that study is continuing to go on, and like any longitudinal study, you spend a couple years working, I was going to say your tail off very hard to get things up and running, and then the data starts coming out. And we are seeing effects that persist. Respiratory effects, for example, have persisted, some cardiovascular effects in the population that are related to the level of exposure. We've seen effects of the dispersants on the people who were more heavily exposed to the dispersants. I think what we see in this population, both from the Gulf Workers Study and from the consortium that we had, that was formed, the extramural consortium that we formed with 7 other institutes and centers to follow up. The biggest effect I see with this disaster and with any other is the mental health, that stress that results from it. So we do see increases in anxiety and depression and PTSD in the population. So that was some of that. This is what I had wanted to talk about here was, I think that experience with the Gulf oil spill led to the development, led by Aubrey Miller, of our disaster research response. In 2013, an article was published in the New England Journal of Medicine by Francis and Nikki Lurie and Tom Frieden and a few others, saying we need to be able to conduct research when you have an emergency situation so that we know what to do the next time and how to avoid problems of the cleanup workers as well as the people who are directly impacted by the research. And so that has led to what I say is a very exciting program, which we work very closely with the National Library of Medicine. I think many of you have heard me at times mention the fact that we've got over 300 and I think 50 drop-down protocols and information on the website so that when a disaster occurs, people can rapidly get information. We here at NAEHS have an IRB approved protocol, or kind of a pre-approved protocol to get into the field quickly. You'd obviously have to do a protocol amendment for the specifics of the situation, but that has also been developed at several of our grantee institutions. And I will say that, for example, after Hurricane Harvey, some of our grantees were in the field again in less than 2 weeks taking samples, both environmental samples and beginning to take biospecimens. So we also ran a number of workshops, and the Harvey one is another good example. Our first workshop was in California, and I think we've talked about that was a tsunami that hit the port of LA and the port of Long Beach, and the conclusion after participating is that everybody would die. Not a good conclusion, but in fact, it has led to some changes in some of the infrastructure and escape routes from the little peninsula that's there. We actually did in 2014 a simulated, maybe it was 2015, we simulated a level 2 hurricane coming up the Houston Ship Channel. Well, guess what happened when Hurricane Harvey hit? And in fact, that had led to improved first responder abilities, better abilities of the departments, the public health in the area and of the environmental to deal with Hurricane Harvey solution. And we've actually evaluated the results of that training, and that was really good news. So we continue to hold these kinds of exercises. We're really interested in emerging issues. So I've mentioned PFAS, and they've certainly emerged, but I think the extent of the PFAS contamination is much greater than we ever thought. You know, for many years, starting maybe in the 90s, we heard about PFOA and PFOS, but now we know that there are almost 5,000 different PFAS, many of them we can't even monitor for. There's a lot of work going on in that area. And then this picture is looking at sugarcane workers, and I think many of you are aware of the tremendous, the epidemic that's occurring in warm agricultural climates where we have agricultural workers who are developing chronic kidney disease, and we don't know why. And these are young, often young people. There are some people, for example, in Mexico who've been reported as young as 17 and 18 who are in kidney failure. We're finding these are not people who have the classic risk factors such as hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, and so on. These are people who should be healthy young people, and we have whole villages in certain areas in Central America, certain areas in Peru, certain areas, for example, in Sri Lanka, in southern India, a number of other parts of the world where it's being reported. There are also now a couple of reports from some areas in Texas and in southern Colorado of, again, this unknown kidney disease. Lots of hypotheses. So far, nobody's been able to pinpoint it, whether it's even the same, exactly the same condition or what same causative agent in the multiple sites, we don't know. All we know is that you get people who go into renal failure. Once somebody's in renal failure, sometimes it's pretty hard to tell how they got there. So I want to say our extramural program is very involved in this and is involved in holding a workshop, and NTP has really stepped up to the plate, looking through their hundreds and hundreds of subchronic and chronic animal data to look for the studies where we have seen kidney effects, to see if that can give us any handle on how to go forward. Yes? Well, you know what? Why don't we just keep going? I think maybe we could change it later so people could look in the council and have the correct presentation. I think I'm doing okay. Okay, translation and dissemination.
Maybe you want to switch.
So with the translation and dissemination one, that one is one I did. I think many of you are aware of what Christy Drew and Christy Pettibone produced basically as well last year, which talked about moving translation. Many of you know that it's often called going from, in a clinical sense, it's often going from the bench to the bedside. Oh, thank you. But in this case, it's now going, it's going from the bench to the bedside to public health, often through policy and the different ways doing this. I've mentioned so this, what I had wanted to mention with the PFAS was that our whole approach to systematic review. Systematic reviews have been used extensively in clinical evidence for many years. And NTP, the Office of Hazard Assessment and Translation, took that as a starting point and developed it to say, when you're dealing with environmental chemicals, you're not going to have controlled clinical exposures. That would not be ethical. So how can we incorporate the epidemiological information? How can we incorporate the animal information? How can we incorporate the mechanistic information? And one of the first major ones that they issued was the review of the immunotoxicity of PFOA and PFOS. And the conclusion from that review was that those compounds are both presumed human immunosuppressants. And that, again, the conclusion was based on mechanistic, animal, and epidemiological studies as well. Actually, I heard some really interesting data just in Japan a week or two ago about follow-up in the Hokkaido birth cohort, where they actually have evidence that children who are more highly exposed in utero to these PFOS, PFOA, and PFHXS were the ones that were measured, have an increased incidence of infectious disease. So these immune suppression that has been observed and actually has clinical consequences. EHP, I think many of you know that we reformulated that journal. It is now totally an electronic journal. And Sally Darney has done a great job for the past couple years as editor-in-chief, but we've reformulated the model that we're going to use going forward. And we are kind of in the final process of selecting a new editor-in-chief. We hope that within a month or so we'll have made that decision. The editor-in-chief going forward will not be a full-time fed. There'll be someone who has their own research program if they so desire, and we'll be spending a half-time running, helping to provide the scientific leadership to the program. NTP, again, has reformulated how they're getting their information out. Not only have they, the long term, they've had technical reports for the cancer studies, the 2-year studies, and the subchronic studies, but now they're producing reports for the reproductive and development studies and the immunotox studies and some of the other approaches to get that information out. I'm not sure if this was supposed to be talking about artificial turf or not, but anyway, I think that gives us a good, and we're doing more and more with, for example, getting out, fact sheets, which I think both NTP and NAEHS have many fact sheets that are fully available on the web, and they're really, I would urge you to use them for communication devices because they're written clearly and succinctly to get the information across. Oops, I think now you have to control me. Okay, so I've seen the development of the pipeline as extremely important for NAEHS, that we are, never mind our work that we do to improve scientific literacy in the general population, but also training of our new programs. So, for example, one of the things that we've developed, and again, I guess I give the Christies credit for much of this, is the career track, which is tracking our T32 trainees and their success stories. We partner with 4 other institutes, have joined us now in this program, but we know what our T32 trainees have done. We need to begin to extend this to try to look at all the trainees we've had on NAEHS R01s, for example. That's a much more difficult problem. We're going to extend it more. We have the information from Superfund, and we're going to be looking at that as well. I think, let's see, remembering what this is, Scholars Connect is a program that I'm very excited about. That is a program that we started here at NAEHS. Many of you may have heard of the Meyerhoff program, which started at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, by Freeman Hrabowski, which is an area to increase the number of diverse candidates in STEM. And we've kind of made a mini Meyerhoff here where we recruit 10 undergraduate students from local universities, from underrepresented groups, bring them in. They have a year of training where they are actually in a lab doing research, but they also get a lot of additional training and mentoring opportunities to present and so on. And we've done an analysis for the first 5 years of the program, and over half of them have gone on to graduate school or medical school, and many of the others are working in STEM fields. So we're really excited about this intensive effort and how it's going forward. these are actually, that was one of our Scholars Connect winners last year who gave the presentation. Okay, so that's been a key issue. And then community engagement we can talk about briefly, and I think this is the Partnerships in Environmental Public Health, which is a great program run by Liam O'Fallon that we're fully supporting and have. It's an umbrella over all of our community efforts. When I came on board, I basically made the decision that we had to have community engagement cores in all of our center programs, because you've all heard me say that if you don't involve the community in which you want to work, you're not going to be successful. Helicoptering in is not going to lead to the results you want to know. So that we've been working, for example, we continue our efforts in advancing environmental justice. This really started, or our strong efforts here in 1994 with President Clinton's executive order for environmental justice and Dr. Olden participating. I do a whole bunch of community visits and forums. So this was visiting the Navajo Nation with CIMA. That was pretty enlightening, but we were able to actually achieve, by visiting one of the Navajo hospitals in Tuba City, we were able to actually get them to understand the importance of looking at some of the environmental issues in their population. In Indian country, as you know, there are thousands of abandoned mines, major problem with arsenic, uranium, other heavy metal contamination. This was a farm tour I actually did last summer when we did at the Environmental Health Core Centers meeting that was held at the University of Iowa. And we went to visit 3 kinds of local farms who have very different approaches to dealing with environmental issues. This was actually at an organic farm. And then we've met with people. This, I think, was related to a forum we did related to breast cancer in Anacostia, in George Washington City, District of Columbia area. This was done with GW in Georgetown, but the point is that they have a very high incidence of breast cancer, especially triple-negative breast cancer in the African-American community, and talking about them with some of the issues. And, next one. So another thing I think we've really been quite successful in working on is some of the issues of employee engagement and services that we've been doing. So I think many of you have heard my mantra of one NAEHS. And that doesn't mean that every division does the same thing that every other division. In fact, they don't do the same thing, but they know what others are doing, and there are opportunities to work together, so to make the whole bigger than the sum of the parts. And that's been a real, I think, success story here. This is just showing someone on a yoga mat, but I thought it was very important that we have our own exercise center here at NAEHS, so that we reconfigured our A basement level and developed not only a training center, and our library is down there, but we also have a really nice exercise room and workout room, which is heavily used. The Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey is something that we have to do every year. I should say, relatively, I think in 2011, we did to back up, when I took over in beginning of 2009, we had 189 findings that we had to address, problems that had to be solved. We were able to deal with most of them fairly quickly and take care of them. But one of them was they wanted to know, well, what's the mood of your employees? What do you need? So we did something called the Pulse Survey. Some of the staff may remember doing this, where we were taking the pulse of NAEHS. And we did pretty well in that. It was a lot better, I think, than if it had been done before I came on board. But the point was, it gave us a lot of constructive ideas and things that we could work on to make our lives here even better. The Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey is something that's done through the Office of Personnel Management and the department, and our scores in that and our participation has gone up, which is really pretty important, from about 48% to about 70 or 77% in the past year. So people want to make this the best place that it can possibly be to work. And I'm not remembering what all of these were, but I think we have I know one thing I wanted to say was that here at NAEHS, I think we have solar panels on the roofs. We compost more than 95% of the waste from our cafeteria. We issued the first sustainability report
for any part of NIH or HHS. And then the other thing, this is our zero energy warehouse that opened about 1.5 years ago, or maybe 2 years ago. And not only is it a zero energy, it's LEED Platinum. And this is the first building within the department that meets that status. Oh, this is kind of showing things that we're doing to get healthy and grow green and so on. Oh, there's our little girl again. Whoops. Can we go back a sec? Can we go back a sec? Well, if we can't, we'll come back to it later. There we go. This was the issue again. We're managing, for example, I don't know if when you drove, oh, you haven't been to the campus. We have the most beautiful wildflowers when you drive in right now that are blooming, and part of that is that we made a decision, and Chris Long deserves lots of the credit for a lot of this, but we made a decision that we were going to go to natural plantings. And so we have lots of wildflowers and different kinds of things, but right now they are exquisitely beautiful. We have a lot of water reuse as well as control the amounts of waters that we have and kind of that. Okay, let's see the next slide. I have no idea where we're, oh, so we're really at the end now, and we're going to have to go back to the things that we missed. But this is one of the things I have to say I'm extremely proud of, and that is the leadership team that I've assembled. When I came on board, I had no permanent leadership. Gwen had been appointed acting head of DIRT the month before. I took a few months, then we actually had a national search for a new head of DIRT, and Gwen did such a great job that she became the permanent head. I think that was in 2010. Rick joined us as the permanent deputy in 2011. Daryl, who had, when I came on board, was the acting clinical director. He became scientific director in November of 2011. Chris, who was the deputy for deputy executive officer and the deputy for the Office of Management, became our executive officer in 2016, okay? Jan became our official head of our clinical research branch in 2015 or 16, Jan? 16. We won't go into some of the delays that took. And Brian became the director of the Division of the National Toxicology Program, as well as the associate director of NTP on January 7th, 2018, and he was the first hire we were able to make after a total freeze that had started on January 20th, 2017. So I think we've got a great group going forward. Now, I missed a couple of the slides. Can we get back to them, Nathan? Okay, so just a quick look at some upcoming events. The National Academies, I worked for 3 or 4 years to get them to develop a new program related to environmental health issues, because environmental health crosses all the academy groups. National Academy of Science, National Academy of Medicine, National Academy of Engineering, also things like the Department of Transportation, or the Office of Transportation and so on. And this is Environmental Health Matters Initiative, and its first workshop is occurring, and I know it's oversubscribed, in 2 weeks on PFAS. And this is not going to focus on health effects of PFAS. It's more going to be what the heck is out there and what do we do about it. There's going to be the Triangle Global Health Collaborative every year has an annual conference, which will be here in mid-October. This is actually an all-day symposium in honor of Alan Wilcox, who is now emeritus in the Division of Intramural Research. He is one of the most preeminent researchers in reproductive epidemiology, and in honor of his retirement, there's a workshop being scheduled here. We have our annual Science Days at the beginning of November, and again, this is a program that was started in the Division of Intramural Research and has now expanded to include all of NAEHS as well, and that's an opportunity for all our science to get together and mix and learn. Our Superfund annual meeting is going to be in Seattle in November, and then we've been participating very actively in the development of the federal-led action plan research needs workshops, which will be held in December. Okay, a couple of awards I wanted to make or mention for a couple. So Tom Kunkel, so the scientific director, this is Daryl's awards
for excellence. These are chosen by the Board of Scientific Counselors for the best senior investigator and the best tenure track investigator for their presentations that year. So Tom Kunkel from our Genome Integrity and Structural Biology Lab, and Shanshan Zhao, who is in our Biostat and Computational Biology branch. Oops, I'm sorry, next one, Nathan. So K99s, NAEHS is pretty successful at this. I can claim no credit because obviously I'm recused, I have no idea, but every year we get somewhere between, say, 4 and 6 usually, maybe 2 and 6 every year. The ones just awarded recently for Natalie Scoliano, who's working with Tricia Jensen in the developmental neurobiology group, and Monica Pillen, who's working with Robin Stanley, one of our tenure track investigators in Signal Transduction Lab. I should mention that Trish Jensen just recently got tenure. And then Elizabeth Martin, who some of you may have, we've mentioned her name before. She was a trainee at UNC working with, working related to arsenic work, is now working with Paul Wade's group in the Eukaryotic Transcriptional Regulation group. But she won a Pratt Award, and she's our second, or we've had a number of Pratt Awards, and at the moment we have someone in John Sadlowski's. But this is actually an award that comes from NIGMS. And it's a 3-year award, really a nice recognition for her and her work. Next slide. Chandra Jackson and Jennifer Martinez we're extremely proud of. They just were recognized by winning PCASI awards. These are both 2 tenure tracks we have. Chandra's a Statman investigator in the Epi branch, looking at social epidemiology issues, and Jennifer Martinez is a tenure track investigator in the Immunity, Inflammation, and Disease laboratory focusing on the immune system. So we're really excited for both of them. And then we've got a couple of grantees who've gotten PCASI awards as well. We're very proud of Kwang-Wung Chung from MIT and Mariah Thompson from Wayne State University. Next slide. Wanted to recognize Ron Evans, who was just elected to be a AAAS fellow. Ron is a leader in the field of nuclear hormone receptor biology, both steroid receptors and orphan receptors as well. And the next slide, I wanted to mention our River Awards. Now, River in some ways are NIEHS Merit Awards, but these are 7-year awards where you're funded to do your program, not a specific project. And we're very excited by this program. But Manish Arora, who we all know because of the tooth work and the fact that he's developed the tree rings of the teeth so you can actually go in there and identify timing. But this is a more broad program than specifically just the teeth. Bruce Hammock is certainly not a mid-career investigator. Bruce is a very senior investigator and a member of the National Academy of Science. He works on prostaglandins and that whole pathway and its role in disease. Patricia Presco at the University of Pittsburgh. Let's see, I'm sorry, Patricia, but I know that you're working on stuff related to
DNA repair.
Excuse me, DNA repair. Okay, that one, yeah. Okay, I've got to get the couple to remember specifically some of these. Kim Tu is looking at Parkinson's disease, and chemical exposure and association there. Wen Zhai from Pittsburgh. So we got 2 from Pittsburgh this year, which was kind of interesting. And he's actually looking at CAR, PXR, and the AH receptor and trying to focus on what their role is in normal physiology. You know, since they are all metabolize endobiotics as well as xenobiotics, what are they really doing? And Mark Zilka, who here at UNC, who is a lead researcher and doing some very exciting work related to autism and genetic, the interaction between environment and genes in autism. The Casey Donnelly Awards, which are part of our Superfund program. Jill Riddell is from West Virginia, is looking at karst and the migration of
of compounds through karst, which is, kind of got a lot of that in Puerto Rico. I remember we were talking about that. But she is going to be going to University of Arizona, I think, and Nabil Sheikh from the University of New Mexico Superfund Center, interested in ways to remove uranium. Again, a major problem, especially their centers focusing a lot on the Navajo and some of the Pueblo tribes, and looking at removal of uranium. And I'm blanking at the moment on where, Bill, do you remember where he's going? Okay, I'll find it, hold on. Having things a little out of order is a little challenging. Sorry, I can let you know later exactly, or maybe Heather?
Danielle, do you know?
Danielle, remember where he's going? Sorry, I had it all written down, but things are a little out of order now. But again, this is a fabulous opportunity where these young people get to spend 3 months in another laboratory to expand their toolbox. Next one. So, special announcement going forward. Next one. Okay, I think you all know that I am going to be retiring from the federal government in 3 weeks. After 40 years of service, I had my 40th anniversary last month. I'm going to continue, hopefully as emeritus, for about 2 years, keep my lab going. So I actually have a little office that's going to be set up right near my lab, which should be fun. But I will no longer be an employee. I'll just be a volunteer. I intend to stay engaged with the environmental health research community, and my husband keeps saying to me, I thought you were retiring, and then he's looking at the schedule of the talks I've agreed to give and the advisory boards, for example, that I've agreed to serve on, and committees. I will say I'm looking forward to actually being a member of several National Academy committees instead of just a liaison, which is all you can be when you're a Fed. So I've already been basically enlisted into one that'll be starting this fall. There are going to be a number of events which are going to be really fun. The Friends are planning a celebration on the Hill on 9/24, so it's a really busy day, 2 congressional briefings, and then a party. No, I'm not supposed to say party. An event. And then we're having a celebration here in RTP, which is actually going to be on the afternoon of October 3rd. I'm looking forward to that, I should say. And then I think the thing I'm really excited about is leadership is organizing a symposium in my honor that will be held sometime in the spring when Rod Bill is open again. And if we go to the last slide of mine, we've got lots of interim leadership who are stepping up to the plate. So I want to thank Rick tremendously for agreeing to be the acting director. Rick is not interested in being the permanent director, so this makes it very comfortable, I think, as we go forward. With that, Gwen has agreed to step up and be the acting deputy director, although she still will be providing some strategic leadership for DIRT during the time, and Pat Maston will step up to be the acting director of DIRT. So there aren't going to be a lot of new faces initially. Now I can't remember whether I have one more slide to tell you just briefly about the search. Okay, I do. So the search committee is being established. I don't know if I can mention who's on it, but I can. Chris Austin, who's head of NCATS, and Doug Lowy, who's the acting director of NCI, are the co-chairs of it. There are 2 other IC directors on it. I know of one of our stellar extramural folks who is on the committee. I don't know any more than that. It is not a transparent process. It's not an open process. Whoever they get interested in will never come down to NAEHS to be interviewed or to meet people. It's all handled up in Bethesda. I anticipate that it will take approximately a year before a new director is on board. That's the approximate timeline that I've chaired a few of these. It takes a long time. But the committee has been formed, the search committee. They will be actively looking for people who are interested and identifying people that they think might be good. If you have any suggestions, feel free to please get them to me, or for example, Rick or Gwen. But I will say Chris Austin has been very open and has asked me, is it okay if I contact you afterwards to get some information? Both he and Larry Tabak had asked me for nominees for the for the search committee, so I think they are interested in our views going forward. So there will be, again, an announcement that will come out. I assume that will probably take 2 to 3 months at least before that announcement will be out. And then the search, usually they leave it open for a couple months until they get a good number of applicants. Usually for an institute director, you get somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 applications, completed applications. The search committee will cull that down to, I should say, a manageable number, say 6 to 10. Those 6 to 10 will be brought in for speed dating interviews up in Bethesda. From that, the search committee will cull it down somewhere between usually 2 to 5 applicants who will be referred to Dr. Collins, who will bring in those candidates for an all-day interview in Bethesda, and then he will make the decision. But usually it's approximately a year till someone gets, at least is on board, sometimes a little bit longer than that till they're actually on board. So that tells you where we're headed. So I think now I turn it over to, well, first of all, thank every one of you, everyone in this room, council, and everybody, my staff who are here, for an amazing, almost 11 years, where I've had lots of fun almost every day. So, turn it over to Gwen.
Thank you, Linda. So as Linda said, well, this is her last council meeting as chair of our council, and I didn't want to have that missed opportunity for members of council to maybe reflect on some personal moments or be able to share some thoughts about Linda's leadership and what it's meant to them and to the field. So I've asked Sue Shantz, and thank you so much, Sue, for organizing this, and she's going to pop back up on the screen, I think, and moderate the next session.
Thank you, Gwen. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I'm hearing an echo of myself, so I'll do my best not to get too distracted by that. It's a really great honor for me to introduce this tribute to Linda Birnbaum as she prepares to retire as director of NAEHS. And Linda, I'm so sorry I can't be there with you in the room today. I so wish I was there in person. But what I'm going to do is just give a brief introduction, and then there are a number of other council members who will speak to Linda's many accomplishments over her career, and especially during her years as director. And this next slide shows the speakers in the order in which they will give their comments. Since I'm not in the room, I would ask that each speaker introduce the next person who's going to be speaking directly after you. And I would like to start off by giving a brief history of some of the early years in Linda's career, and when she first began to develop as a scientist and an innovator and the leader that she would become. So if I can have the next slide, please. Linda likes to say that her career has been a winding road, and that seems to be true. One of the things that has happened along that winding road is that she developed into a toxicologist. And that was an evolution. She didn't start out as a toxicologist. It does seem that she was always a scientist, though. And I was very interested to read recently in her autobiography, which is referenced on this slide, that very first science project was to construct a light-up papier-mâché brain. Next, she conducted a study to learn how thyroid hormones affect growth and activity. And Linda began this research at the ripe old age of 14 with 40 rats that, believe it or not, she housed in her parents' basement. And this work led to her first major award. She was the winner of the New Jersey State Science Fair, and also her first claim to fame, as she was featured in an article in Life magazine. Linda did her undergraduate work at Rochester and earned both her MS and her PhD in microbiology at the University of Illinois, my academic home. And it's after she left Illinois that path down the winding road started. She held a string of positions in academia in the early years before eventually coming to rest at the National Toxicology Program, where she spent about 10 years before moving down the road to the US EPA for 19 years, and then eventually completing the circle back to NAEHS as director in 2009. So on the next slide, here we have Linda, circa 1969, as a bright-faced young PhD student in microbiology, and also Linda returning to Illinois in 2010 as the director of NAEHS to receive an Alumni Achievement Award. And I'm guessing that Linda is still a tiny bit nostalgic about those early years at Illinois, because before the award ceremony, she wanted to drive by the apartment that she and her husband had lived in during their grad school days. Linda's remarks that night were a testament to who she is as a person and a leader. As always, she focused the spotlight away from herself and onto the science and the scientists that she's made it her mission to support. Coincidentally, we had just received Children's Environmental Health Research Center at Illinois, and Linda focused her remarks on our new center and the important work we would do with NAEHS funding. I had planned to say a few more words about Linda's stewardship of the Children's Center's program and how important she's been in promoting research, outreach, and translation in the area of children's health. But I received a wonderful quote from Bob Wright, if I can have the next slide. So I'm going to end by letting you read Bob's words about the Children's Center program. And I will just say, thank you so much, Linda. You've been an inspiration to all of us, and we are going to sorely miss you. So we really hope you do stay involved and that we'll see you involved in science for a few more years. And then next up, we have Lynn Goldman, who's going to come up to the podium and say a few words.
Don't think so. Okay, well, thank you so much. So in a sense, I also share a connection with Linda, but rather than being an alum from a university, she and I are both really veterans of kind of a public health war that has involved dioxins and other persistent organic pollutants. And so I'm really turning to her time at EPA when I worked in public health for the state of California, and we were scrambling around tracking these dioxins that had contaminated communities. We started on this because of a pentachlorophenol fire that created a lot of contamination. And seeing how these dioxins were moving from the soil to farm animals and into people, and yet EPA had very poor control over this, a ridiculous cleanup number for the levels that were in the soil at that time, and no control at all over the emissions. And so we were all very fortunate that from the laboratory, Linda was pulled into a position of leading something that at that time was called the dioxin reassessment, which really had a profound impact not only on the ability for public health to control dioxins, but also other persistent organic pollutants. If you go to the next slide. So her contributions, though, in the area specifically of dioxins and other POPs were pretty amazing. They were key to public health being able to control these things, to be able to understand that you had to use internal measures of dose to compare doses across species, and that the profound impact that it's had across all of the POPs, to be able to look at developmental toxicity, not just cancer, but numerous other kinds of toxicities, a multiplicity of late life effects that she herself not only demonstrated through her own research, but she fostered that research that others were able to do. That she led the development of a much more protective method of doing assessments of these chemicals that took into account that they occurred in mixtures and that there were similarities in structures that needed to be factored in, and that she time and time again convened people across the world to agree on how to do that so that we could have defensible approaches in public health to be able to do that. Her authorship of papers that are so highly cited and it's so key and have been so important, and I'd love to show them all to you, but they only gave me a few minutes to speak. She also, though, and I saw her do this, organized key conferences, key consultations with the World Health Organizations and others to bring everybody along, industry as well as the environmental community, to understand what was going on with these chemicals. Mentoring scholars. I saw it firsthand many times. People who might have been working in other areas that were related, she found a way to pull them in to do environmental health research, to be able to look at a plethora of effects, whether on children, on women, throughout a lifetime. And her role in communicating. Her ability to take very complex scientific ideas and explain them. I don't need to tell all of you because you all just saw her do that with us in her director's report. Next slide. So, of course, she has led the NAEHS. Others are going to talk about that. But I would say that one of the things that I have seen is how proud each and every person in this community is to have her as the director. That when she talks about your work, our work, my work, I'm proud of having a director like her who has such a wide breadth of understanding, ability to communicate that, and insight into not only what we are doing, but what we could be doing in the future. Her leadership has been astounding. Next slide. So I view Linda as a role model, certainly for my own career, for many of my colleagues. Not only that she views science as a continuous exploration and a source of joy. She is excited by the work that is done in this institute and is done in environmental health every day of her life. Her leadership within science, which has been stellar. Her integrity. She has great integrity that is an example for us all, especially in this day of fake news. Public health has always been her first priority. As a public health person myself, it has been wonderful to have as a partner a scientist like Linda who really understands the translation from the laboratory to the community to protect people. Her, as I said before, clear and forthright, honest communications, even when it's difficult politically, honest communications, her courage and moral clarity. And that is something that is a hard thing to quantify. As a scientist, I don't know how to do that, but I know it when I see it, and she has it. Next slide. So I asked some people what they would want to say. A couple of people who worked with Linda at EPA, one of whom was Bill Farland, who led the laboratory that she was a part of when she was so involved with the organizing all the science around dioxins. He said, I have had the privilege to work with Linda and call her my friend for over 30 years. From her original research on dioxin and other persistent organic pollutants to her leadership at the NAEHS and NTP, her work has advanced the field of toxicology in numerous important ways. She has been a tireless advocate for environmental public health and an excellent communicator regarding hazards and risks in today's world. She has set the bar high for those who will follow in her footsteps. And, you know, woe to whoever winds up getting the directorship after Linda, because I think that's very true. Next slide, and this is my last one, I promise. Carol Browner. Carol, as you know, was administrator of the EPA and the Clinton administration during the time when Linda was leading in the science in this area. I applaud Dr. Linda Birnbaum for her distinguished career, including her work at EPA. She has long been at the forefront of recognizing important and dangerous health effects of pollutants in our environment. She has always been willing to raise her voice and speak out. She will be missed. I wish her well as she leaves public service. I will just correct that, because having worked for Carol, I always did that, and she will tell you that. We will not miss her because she will still be serving the public. We know that she will be present, whether through the national academies, through our science societies, in a myriad of ways. We refuse to see you retire, Linda, and we look forward to seeing what you will do next. So it's my pleasure now to hand the mic over to Jose Manato.
Thank you. It's just an honor and a pleasure to say a few words in this special occasion, and I think my comments are going to be reflective of Linda's contribution to toxicology and through the Society of Toxicology. By the way, she was not president of SLT from 2014 to 2016. It was 2004 to 2005. That was my first. I knew Linda prior to her presidency, but you know, we had the opportunity to work together because I was a member of council during Linda's presidency, and that gave me the opportunity to develop a very strong relationship of mutual respect and admiration. So I would like to highlight two of Linda's important accomplishments as SOT president. The endowment fund that we currently have at SOT was started during her term as SOT president. She did an amazing job rolling out the endowment fund and actually handling some very tough questions from some of our senior members of SOT. And I'm really happy to say that right now, this endowment fund that was basically created under Linda's leadership currently has a balance of $4 million. You know, so we're really, really proud of the work that Linda did. Next slide, please. Let me start by saying that I'm going to be talking about specialty sections and special interest groups. For those of you that might not be aware, Linda was one of the founding members of Women in Toxicology. And Women in Toxicology was established as a specialty section, and Women in Toxicology, basically Linda recognized the potential to create an environment for scientists that was missing in other professional organizations. In addition to that, I worked with Linda on SOT Council in developing the special interest groups in the Society of Toxicology. And the first one became official in 2006, which is the Hispanic Organization of Toxicology. Actually, Linda was really instrumental in helping Council and also the society at large that there are different needs for specialty sections compared to special interest group. And it is amazing to see how the different special interest groups, have grown tremendously, and we have representation from folks from different countries, different ethnic groups, and it's certainly a significant addition to the Society of Toxicology. Similar to the leadership that Linda has provided to NAEHS, Linda challenged the SOT Council, as well as the society in general, to take a more holistic approach regarding science and creating opportunities for scientists to discuss and learn about complex mixtures of toxic chemicals, to discussions about climate change. She really pushed us, council, as well as the society, to think about the role of toxicology in the bigger picture and in a much more bigger context. Next slide. So this was a picture that was taken, the date is correct here actually, so this was a council in 2005. You probably cannot tell from the picture, but during the council dinner we gave a tiara to Linda that she actually wore very proudly through her whole presidential reception. She might have slept with the tiara that night, I'm not sure. But this was a phenomenal group of individuals, that led the society through Linda's presidency. And in the next slide, I'm actually showing this picture in which Linda presents me a plaque in appreciation for serving as counselor to the SOT. Next slide. I just want to take a little bit of time, just a few seconds, to talk about the role of Linda in promoting the development and the establishment of new investigators in environmental health sciences. So this was at the recent Gordon Conference. Two of the speakers are once recipients, Daniel Garlick and Justin Colosino. They're somewhere in there in the audience, To me, what Linda has done for the future of new scientists in environmental health has been phenomenal, and those individuals are an example of how well the future of science in environmental health, and we're in an actual good place. So I requested 2 quotes from past SOT presidents that were also members of council. So Norcom Smith says, Linda, you have had a truly remarkable career, having made numerous significant contributions in environmental health sciences, as is reflected in your 500+ publications. Likewise, you have distinguished yourself by having risen to some of the top leadership positions in your field. I have had the pleasure of working with you in a number of different capacities, including on serving councils, the Society of Toxicology, and NAEHS, and have gotten to know you very well over many years. We have known each other. What I have viewed as among your most important contributions is that regardless of the venue, I have always seen you take a genuine interest in encouraging those who are at early stages of their scientific careers to pursue their dreams. The impact that has had is truly immeasurable. Best wishes to you and David as you transition into the next stage of your lives. Next slide. And Dave Eaton from University of Washington says, to say Linda has had a remarkable career in toxicology is perhaps an understatement. I don't know of anyone who has excelled equally at 2 parallel careers. The first in contribution to original science, in toxicology, over 500 publications, cited over 20,000 times with an H factor of 73. He says, wow. And the second, successfully managing and leading the largest environmental health sciences, research and funding organizations in the world, NIHS, and the National Toxicology Program. Among her many well-deserved honors include election to the National Academy of Medicine in 2010, and election as president of the Society of Toxicology in 2004-5. I'm proud to be her friend and colleague and wish her and David well in the next phase of her career. it is obvious not yet time to utter the word retirement. Next slide. And on a personal note, I would like to show my gratitude to Linda for giving me the opportunity to work here at NAEHS, both in the Board of Scientific Counselors as well as Council. I consider this my second extended family, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to serve. Thank you. Maureen?
Linda, you know how communities think about you, but I don't know whether everyone knows what you did. And so here are a few moments throughout your career as director of NAEHS and what you did for communities. Next slide, please. And I want to recognize John Schelp. Is John Schelp here? Thank you, John, for aiding me in putting this together. When Linda took over, when you took over as NAEHS director, community engagement, environmental justice were either moribund or absent. And researchers like me thought, well, we need to go do something else because I can't do lab, I'm working with people. What will happen to people and answering people's questions? But when you came in, you gave leadership to 3 areas. One is that you made sure that your leadership was translated into action, one. Secondly, that you were serious about community academic partnerships, and that you requested and demanded that many of our centers, many of our consortia, indeed had communities embedded from design to dissemination to answer the real questions and make the answers to those questions meaningful to them. And so you didn't only talk the talk, you walked the walk. And you walked the walk not 2 times, not 10 times, but 25 community forums you participated. And here's what John said about what you did. These community forums are part of Dr. Birnbaum's legacy. She's visited communities from Harlem to Marin County, from Seattle to the Gulf of Mexico, and from San Juan to St. Lawrence. So let's look at some of those places. Next slide, please. Remember this meeting? This is Ba Minh restaurant in New Orleans East among our Vietnamese communities, many of whom had lost their livelihood as part of the oil spill. And you were very polite when you spoke earlier, but here is it from the front line. When there were other organizations with hundreds of millions of dollars devoted to research, none of those dollars went to human health research. You brought NIHS in, not only in the Gulf worker study, but in NTP by fingerprinting the mess that was there, frankly, but particularly to establish 4 community consortia with 3 requirements. 1, that communities were engaged from the beginning till the end. 2, that there was an embedded research project that focused on community resilience. Thank you for the leadership, Claudia Thompson. And 3, that each of those consortia had a community outreach and dissemination core to make happen, to make real, and to answer those questions. Out of this meeting, next slide, please, came a requirement and an answer to the question that they put so often in front of you at that meeting, and that was, will the seafood be safe to eat? Together, through our consortia, we came and answered that question in a locally relevant way. We didn't go out and bought fish and then analyzed those. We actually went out and caught the fish, not only that the Vietnamese community sold, but that they ate, including the bycatch. And we were able to say and publish that the seafood was safe to eat. Next slide, please. And so from the Gulf of Mexico to Anchorage, where you were very instrumental in addressing concerns from the Chicaloon village, and here is where you met with one of the traditional council members to talk about that surface coal mine. Next slide, please. And then to San Joaquin last year, where you addressed regional environmental health challenges. And here are you meeting with the fathers and families of the Healing Roots Garden in Stockton. And I couldn't have said it better as my colleague, Dr. Katrina Kormacher did. She said, I want to thank Linda for her commitment for all kinds of community engagement. Her leadership helped morph NAEHS framework for community outreach from simple education to true engagement. She not only reinvigorated NAEHS commitment, but gave it new energy, direction, and depth. And then there is one last community I'd like to mention. And that's a community I couldn't capture on a slide because that community is all over our nation. In fact, that community is all over the world. And that's the community, your community of mentees. Some of us are here in this room, if you heard before. You have touched each of our careers. You've seen us grow, not only as environmental health researchers, but you've seen us grow as community leaders. Thank you, Linda. And now I introduce Jose Cordero.
Good morning, Linda. I bring greetings from Protect and CRESE, as well as Superfund research program colleagues. We all want to thank you for your leadership, for your vision, and also your personal touch in all the work that you've done at NAEHS and even before. You have really set a new standard for promoting cutting-edge research, very rigorous science that really brings the community and recognizes both the diversity, but also the importance of interprofessional collaboration. This approach is actually speeding up the opportunities for science translation, leading to prevention, but also environmental justice. What a better example than your support for the Superfund research program, where team science is the rule, where biomedical scientists with engineers, social scientists, and communities have been working together and have made many discoveries, and you talk about some of them. And that really has advanced environmental health science, but also has translated into prevention and really environmental justice. But also, it's your vision of breaking silos. And thinking of a great example is your willingness to actually fund projects together with the Consortium for Zika to look at the interaction of infection and pesticides in terms of congenital Zika syndrome. But also, it's really about the rapid response, and you talked a little bit about that in terms of response to Hurricane Maria. That is actually a new way of doing funding research at NIH. But also would like to thank you for your leadership style, especially as Maureen was just talking about reaching out to communities. Your interest in learning about the challenges has been really a hallmark of your tenure as director. And your visit in March of 27, where you participated in the community environmental health forums, was not only greatly appreciated, but it made a big difference. And on the next slide, our colleague Phil Brown, a former member of this council, sent well wishes and remarked on your visit to Alaska, and you mentioned that too, but how incredibly important was to the community, and he heard that over and over again. On the next slide, you can see that you really went all the way to get to Alaska and meet with many of the community members. But there is another aspect to addressing communities and addressing diversity, and that is the importance of diversity as it can be seen in this council. There is a great diversity of the kind of disciplines that are represented, but also from the communities that we come from. On a personal note, I would also like to thank you for your friendship and mentorship. That is something that I will always cherish, and especially your very frank and sincere advice that always has been straight and to the point. Finally, next slide. Like to you brought new trends to NIH with your wonderful strategic planning process, and actually I think that you're the first NIH Institute director that not only have been wearing a sombrero at an NIH event, but really understand diversity. So thank you for your leadership. You really have made a mark at NIH and bringing together rigorous science, the concept of CVPR, the community engagement, and actually we can see how it's been translated to prevention and environmental justice. So, Linda, muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Good morning. I am extremely grateful to be here to talk about Linda. Linda, thank you for building an empire, I would say, of environmental health sciences. Noted that during her tenure, 10 years, the number of environmental health science core center has grown to 23. And the most important part, as if you notice on this figure on your left-hand side, I would say, your left-hand side, that it is not just on the East Coast and the West Coast. Actually, you put the first ideal state, which is Kentucky, on the map. And then you also added 2 more in the South, in Texas. And I hope that the next director will continue this trend. America is not East and West, but also in the center. And I forgot, also Chicago. So, okay, the other thing you note is the 2 numbers, 8 and 23. 23 are the number of center. 8 are women leading the centers. So that has grown. Linda, I applaud you. And most importantly, I want to tell you, Linda must have traveled, I believe, to all of the center events. And I have some surprise for her because I have done some groundwork. And eventually, you will receive a very special album, picture album, for all your visits to every single one of these centers. But I can't give it to you right now. I'd have to do a lot of homework. Next slide, please. The most important thing is Linda has big visions and also leading the nation. She has set national and global agenda for EHS with 2 strategic plans. The one I like the most is the one that is in the top, 2018 to 2023, which actually is simple. The mission is advancing environmental health sciences and through stewardship and support, and the most important part is translation. Data to knowledge, knowledge to action. Without action, we're not getting there. Linda, thank you very much for your visions. And before I go forward to talk about a little bit, we are asked to say, well, how Linda affects each one of us. I humbly say that the next slide, Linda absolutely is the person who have enabled my career. I used to be very scared of her because she's always scientifically innovative and vigorous and asks the toughest question. Whenever in the panel, I'm shaking. So Linda, I appreciated that. You make me better. And the most important thing is the commitment and the passion that you have put into each one of us. You are a great communicator. I try to mimic it. At one of these whatever you, this 50th anniversary. It was a 4-minute presentation. I must be sweating from top to bottom. I was so scared. And Linda actually also took me to the Congressional Briefing, which is amazing. And finally, I thank you very, very much for involving me in the council. And also taught me everything about how to become a leader in the 14 years that I'm at University of Cincinnati. So I remember Benjamin Franklin said, "Tell me I forget. Teach me I remember. Involve me, I learned." I might want to add, humbly, show me the path and I'll follow. Linda, there are many people, including myself, are following your footsteps. I have thanked you and applaud you. Thank you for your wonderful career.
I really can't say much. I'm trying to hold back a lot of the tears. Thank you all, everyone in this room, for what you do. And if I've been able to provide some inspiration and some hope and some paths going forward, I'm really glad I could do that. Thank you all.
All righty. Well, that was amazing. I think it's hard to go on with the meeting now. I feel like we need a break. But we do have one action to take care of before we break for lunch. And so I'm going to ask Claudia Thompson to come to the podium, and we're going to talk about the Core Center program, which was very much part of the tribute. She's going to talk about where we've been and some ideas for the next 5 years.
No. Okay, so I'll have to use this. All right, so I'm going to try and do this a little bit quick so that we have enough time for lunch before we get started again back at 1 o'clock. But good morning all, and it's really my pleasure to be presenting to Council this morning our concept for the continuation of the Environmental Health Sciences Core Centers. But before I begin, I really just want to acknowledge all the people who have been actively involved in the centers over time and really make it the vibrant program that it is. And that includes Liam, who oversees the Community Engagement Core, Takara, who's new to our branch and has helped a lot in sort of some of the analysis of the program, as well as James and Brianne, who are our audacious grants management specialists, and Linda Bass, and more recently Varsha, who run the annual reviews of the center's programs that keeps it as vibrant and competitive as it is. So I want to thank them personally. I also want to thank, you'll hear a little bit more later, folks from Christy Drew's branch, in particular Christy Pettibone and Carolina Medina, who helped in an analysis of some of the changes that we've made to the centers over the past few years, and I'll be talking about it a little bit, and Takara from my branch, who also was involved in that effort. So today I'm going to just give a very brief background about the centers, how we've seen environmental health sciences evolve through the lens of the Core Centers program, how we're going to build for the future, looking at some analysis of changes that we made, what we might think about that, and then a concept moving forward. And really, I plan for this time to really have some active dialogue and discussion with council and the council reviewers about some of the ideas we have for the program moving forward. Okay, so for those who may not be familiar with the Environmental Health Sciences Core Center, it is a P30 NIH mechanism that provides infrastructure to facilitate research by its center members. It guides and supports, for us, environmental health research at an institution, and it has many goals to provide that intellectual leadership that fosters innovation, that brings scientists from many diverse backgrounds together to really move the field of environmental health sciences forward. It focuses on how we can translate our research into public health outcomes, clinical practice, through providing an atmosphere of collaboration and innovation. It really fosters through its pilot project program, support of new ideas, high-risk ideas, and future collaborations. And I think which is very important that we've already heard about this morning is really creating that pipeline for the future leaders in environmental health sciences. And lastly, and most importantly, is really the engagement of communities within the Core Center's program, the multi-directional communication and involvement of this community engagement cores within all aspects of the program. So how do these goals get realized within the Core Center infrastructure? So as I've mentioned, it really is an infrastructure program. All the centers have some key components that you can see throughout. Each center identifies a theme that they're particularly interested in and their center members work towards for advancing the science. And the facility cores, which is the key piece of a center program, is there to facilitate and assist in scientists that are funded by NIH and other grants. New to the centers that's also required is the Integrated Health Sciences Facility Core, which I'll talk about later, but was instituted to really facilitate translation of the research that's ongoing within the center to make a change, whether it's in policy, whether it's in communities, whether it's in practice. As I've already talked about, community engagement is also a required element of the centers. And the pilot projects is a program that I've talked about that really is the only aspect of a center that gives money out to do some primary research. And this is used in many different ways by the centers, but it's really an opportunity to bring in new center members, to really kind of expand what we think about environmental health and allow for some of that high-risk, high-payoff kinds of activities in sort of a safe zone. Okay, so currently this is the map. You just saw it. Thank you, Shook May. We have 22 active centers at this point. And this is just some fun facts about the centers. As I said, we have almost over 1,250 center members that are supported by our 22 centers. In the last year, over 1,300 publications were that cited the core centers. Since '81, we've had almost 3,000 patents that have been linked to NIH-supported publications. And through our community engagement cores, there's been almost 200 different types of materials deposited within the Partnerships Environmental Health Resource Center, that anything from educational materials, infographics, videos, all focused on communicating environmental health concepts to different audiences. So what I'd like to talk about is how we've seen sort of the evolution of the environmental health sciences over the years. So many of you may know or may not know that the center's program has been in existence for over 55 years. It's actually older than NAEHS has been designated as an NIH institute. And in those very early years in the 60s, I would say the initial driver for creating the Core Center program is really to have these focus on expanding environmental health sciences across the nation and having a place where we could bring researchers together to really define that field. And I would say that we've done a pretty darn good job, both within centers and just the field in general, to have a very robust and vigorous environmental health sciences research scientists across the country. And so as the sciences evolve, the questions of environmental health have become more complex. The centers have had to rise and evolve in order to really sort of keep moving the science forward. And there's 4 themes that I'd like to talk about, and sort of that evolution of the centers and how it has really promoted and moved environmental health sciences. That's in the areas of translational research, community engagement, the thought of multi-institution collaboration and networks as the center's program was developing and evolving, at some point it had been a pretty solid program that was very centrally focused within the university, and the research was in that. And since I have been part of the center's program, I've really worked hard to think about how we can change that framework of discussion to more of a network and a national resource. And lastly, talk about the career development. So in the interest of time, I'm going to go through very quickly. A couple of years ago, we had a webinar series with Integrated Health Science and Facility Cores, which, as I said, were put in place to really focus on translational research. And we had 4 weeks of updates from the IHFCs to see how they were doing translational research and the support they give to the centers. And these were just some of the different topics that came out of those webinars. And these are really just a brief snippet of things. So for example, the measuring kinetic rates of methylmercury eliminations was a project out of University of Rochester that provided translational pilot projects to really look at this issue in the context of understanding food allergies in children, and that they were working with the old Mennonite population and comparing those children who have very, very few food allergies to the general population, and trying to think about what are the differences between those groups, and it's something we could capitalize in making improvements in health. It's just one of so many different examples. Community engagement. I think initially the community engagement cores with community outreach and education. And initially they're very sort of one way out. We have a center, we have science, we're going to tell the communities what we do, and what we can do for you. But really that is not a sort of a viable approach. And over the years, the community engagement cores have really evolved to be bidirectional, multi-directional, have been very much integrated within all aspects of a center program. It's really heartening to see that. And so we've really seen that evolution of development of communication materials to focusing on the resources within centers, to facilitate citizen science, to have community partnership training, seeing pilot project funds going from centers to communities to conduct research that's important to them, understanding issues within the communities that come back to the centers that have evolved into additional research projects. It's been extremely fulfilling to see how community engagement is so integral into our centers program. A third component that has really evolved, I think, is sort of the concept of these multi-institutional collaboration and networks. So we're seeing over time that not only just sort of single university, but we're seeing networks of universities coming together as sort of a collaboration in a regional area to focus on environmental health. And we have 2 currently, one with the University of Chicago, University of Illinois, Chicago, and then one that was recently funded at Baylor that involves Baylor College of Medicine, UTMB Health, and University of Texas Health School of Public Health. We've also, over the years, have seen an increase in sort of the development of intersecting working groups and really working with each other to address some really emerging issues. And I think the initial foray into this had to do with unconventional gas operations and known as hydrofracking that started with University of Pennsylvania taking lead. It actually involved 16 different centers. Through that probably 2-year effort that came out with position papers. We supported inter-center collaborations to look at a release of volatiles from these operations in communities. Peer-reviewed papers have come out, et cetera. It's been extremely robust. We're seeing more of that moving forward. And also, we've instituted in the last few years an emphasis on sort of inter-center collaborations through an administrative supplement program that we give to both community engagement projects as well as sort of the research scientists. And we've, in the last couple of years, have had seminars on those or webinars, and it's really fulfilling what can be done with a little bit of money to really harness the tremendous capacity of the centers program. And this really kind of it's just some examples of some of the multi-center projects that we've supported through the supplement program. I'd also like to talk about career development. It's always been part of the center's program, and we think it's extremely important to be able to train that next generation of the junior scientists and get them involved in the environmental health sciences. And what I wanted to put up here is that over the years, one way that the centers get together is through an annual meeting. And we've sort of shifted the emphasis in the last few years to be much more interactive and sort of solution and problem solving and or to tackle different kinds of questions. But we've also wanted to involve much more our junior scientists that are being supported through the career development programs at the different universities. And so we've had a sort of competitive process for the last several years where centers nominate one of their junior faculty, and then several of them will come to the annual meeting, and we've really been working hard to engage them much more within the centers. It's actually been the highlight of our annual meetings with presentations that they've given, and in the last couple of years we've had poster discussions so that they can meet everybody at one time and have much longer period of time for interaction. And it's resulted in collaborations of faculty with junior faculty with each other, and it's just amazing the amount of work and how wonderful our next generation is. It's just extremely fulfilling. And in an evaluation I'm going to talk about in a minute, one of the things we actually looked at was the impact of the Core Centers program on new early stage investigator applications to NAEHS. And so for this analysis, we used a cohort of over 300 institutions where we've received ES-NI applications. And of those over 300 institutions, about 11% or 36 have had core centers. And when we look at the applications that are being received by NAEHS by these early stage investigators, it represents about 30 to 33% of the applications. So I would say that having a center within a university is really, we're seeing that conglomeration of individuals really helping foster the careers of our junior faculty. And we've also seen, not as robust, is that in fact that we do see a higher award rate going to new and early stage investigators that are associated with, affiliated with the institution that has a core center. The other thing that I think, we feel the centers have been here for a really long time, and they're one of our landmark programs. And in the last few years, we've really worked towards of raising the visibility of the Core Center program. So we refashioned our webpage back in 2017. We focused on providing more information on accomplishments of the core centers. Liam has developed sort of a monthly update to centers that talks about some new stories, upcoming events, so that the centers know what each other are doing. And as far as like the webpage, we've seen a really about a doubling of hits over the last 3 years. And what's particularly rewarding is if we look at the centers spotlights when we started in 2017, it went from like 150 hits to almost 1,000 today. So we're seeing more traffic, which I think is really great. And then lastly, we've already talked about this, is just an example of the environmental health, the supplement program, and some of the different kinds of projects that have been supported. So as we mentioned at the very beginning, the Core Centers really should serve as that intellectual hub for advancing environmental health sciences. And so what we have seen over time in the evolution of the program is really that continued, the Core Centers being at the forefront and engaging in topics that are of public health relevance and of scientific rigor. And so these are just some examples of the kinds of activities that are going on with the Core Center, really leading at the sort of the forefront of some of the issues that we're facing today. And so I'm not going to go into it for the matching of time, but it is something that I think is heartening to see that, in fact, as new theories and new ideas of what is important in environmental health sciences, that the centers are providing the infrastructure and the support to facilitate the research to advance those areas for environmental health. So as the centers have evolved, so have program and thinking about what the future, what centers should look like over time. So we're always looking at ways to improve from a management standpoint. And so it's really integral into, I think, any large program is to have sort of a continual look at what we've been doing and how we're doing. And so we've had, since 2004, 3 center evaluations that have served different sort of purposes. Back in 2004, it was very focused on outcome and what have the centers done for us. And it looked at highlights, pilot projects, supplements. There's a lot of data collection. And out of that, what came about was a major change to the FOA, where we included the Integrated Health Science Facility Core to really focus on translational research. In 2010, it was really more process-focused evaluation, where we're really looking at some of the structural changes that we made from 2005. And out of that, we saw that there was, in 2013, we changed the eligibility criteria for the centers. And then in 2015, we had a further sort of process and outcome evaluation of the center. And in this case, we really wanted to understand how the facility cores, the Integrated Health Science Facility Core, was being used to facilitate complex emerging and translational research, and how we could tie the core specifically to the advances in the science. And out of this, we realized that we're trying to think about translational research for the environmental health sciences. It was actually kind of difficult using sort of the frameworks in place. So I think a really important outcome of this was the development of the NAEHS Translational Research Framework with Christy Drew's leadership and Christy Pettibone and a number of people both within the NIHS, through the core centers, and the extramural community at large. So we don't do evaluations for the sake. Usually there's something that comes out of it. And what I'm going to talk about for the remainder of the time is that in 2013, we made a major change to the funding eligibility criteria. And since that time, we've now gone through 5 years of what is called then the sliding scale. And we thought before we continue, this was a good to take a little bit of pause and think about what that has done for the core centers. And we've also, and I've already mentioned the second bullet. So back in 2013, when the sliding scale was initiated, there were a number of drivers that were behind our thinking, and Les Reinlib, give a lot of credit for this, was the program director at the time. We've had fixed budgets that the Core Center program represents maybe 8 to 9% of the NIH extramural budget, and that has been pretty stagnant for been pretty level for a very long period of time. And the amount of money that was going to the centers had been basically essentially flat forever at $1 million per program. And so what can we, if the money's going to be stable, what we could do, to think about that. One of the things we thought about was, one of the drivers is that we should think about incentivizing the expansion of the NIHS base. So regardless if you had 3 grants or if you had 20 ES grants, you all received the same amount of money. And we really wanted to think it's important to think about how to continue to increase that base if you're going to be an environmental health Sciences Core Center. And we also thought that a driver was that to provide flexibility for ancillary center-related opportunities, that maybe we could do more with, that we'd have more flexibility and some cost savings to be able to initiate other programs. So what is the sliding scale that we initiated in 2013? We basically looked at the sum in environmental health sciences research that went to ES. We looked at the other NIH funding base, and we came up with a sliding scale that if was under $700.7 million if you had less than $3 million in direct cost in NIHS-related research. And between $3 and $10 million, the center received $1 million, and if you had over $10 million in ES-related funding, you could receive $1.3 million. So as I said, it's been 5 years since we initiated it, so we wanted to get some idea of what the impact of the sliding scale has been on enhancing that environmental ES research base. And we looked at through both looking at the base of funding as well as through the pilot projects as a surrogate. So to address this question, we looked at each grant individually because the new scale was applied at very different times. We reviewed competing applications for grantees both before and after the sliding scale was implemented. And just as an aside, evaluation is really an important aspect of keeping programs robust. And as we've gone through many rounds of evaluations for the core centers, a couple of things that we have noted over time, that it's really been very challenging to collect data, that has been sort of unstructured. It can lead to inconsistencies across the centers. And moving forward, we really plan to create some tools that might make it easier for both you as centers to input data and for us as program to be able to use that data for analysis and communicating the great stuff that's coming out of our programs. Okay. So What did we find? Well, the most critical question we really want to address, could we see a difference in the amount of ESS funding through a center through the sliding scale? And when we looked at that question directly, we compared pre-sliding scale and post-sliding scale, and it was very clear that the collection of data made it impossible to actually answer that question directly, that each center basically provided information before the sliding scale in so many different ways that it was just impossible to compare the two. So we looked at the pilot project as sort of a survey, because that is an aspect of the centers which provides an opportunity to give funding to advance environmental health research. So what we saw is that pre and post scale, that we saw an additional investment in the pilot projects from $11 to $13 million. And we also saw at the bottom picture here, larger pilot projects. So basically, pilot project probably can be up to 25% of a budget. The directors have a lot of flexibility in how they spend that money. And what we see that regardless of pre or post sliding scale, the sort of smaller pilot projects really didn't change that much, but we did see almost a doubling in each case in sort of the larger pilot projects that were being given out. And we hypothesize, although we don't know for sure, that one of the reasons is that we're providing more funds really allows to get the robust preliminary data that would make a submission of a grant more competitive. So, taking into account what we did through the evaluation and sort of what I've observed over the 5 years of the sliding scale, there's a few things that I'd like to discuss. One is that very few of the centers have really been affected by the sliding scale. So that issue of providing flexibility, being able to have maybe additional funds to do different things with the program hasn't exactly been realized. So in the 5 years, we've had 2 programs that were at the $700,000 level, and just recently 1 program at the 1.3. So overall, we're still pretty much a $1 million a year program for the vast majority of the centers. And I think, in conversations with center directors and everything else, I think we're really focusing on the wrong metrics to determine the funding base. So what I show the sliding scale is based almost strictly on the amount and level of funding, okay, in the dollars. And I think there's been too much attention paid to that. And what really the centers are about is expanding the researchers and the kinds of grants that are coming in. So I think there's not been enough attention paid to the people and the number of grants that focus on environmental health sciences. And also what we've seen over time is, directors saying, well, what about this program? What about that program? What about this grant? You also realize some of our initial conceptions on how we consider the calculation of base that we may be missing relevant grants. For example, if NAEHS has partnered with another IC on an FOA, that if you receive a grant, that it should count as an environmental health sciences grant. If a grant results from a pilot project, regardless of what NIH Institute, regardless of what NIH Institute, it should also count. So, taking all this information into account, what I'd like to do now is just lay out here sort of our proposed concept. I think the Centers Program is just an incredible resource to NIEHS. It is just phenomenal, the amount of work that goes out, the quality of the individuals. And it's really not broken. It's not broken, and I don't really need to fix it. So we should continue the P30 mechanism. And as we've done in the past, issue a RFA with the annual receipt date so the community knows when to expect applications to come in. At a minimum, we've always required that 3 active NHS grants to get you into the door to put in an application. And for the most part, the structure, I would say, should remain the same. But there are a couple things that we've talked about today that I want to posit to have conversation from our council reviewers and with council is the modification of the sliding scale and translational research component. So the next 2 slides, I'm just going to throw some questions out there very quickly. I'm then going to turn over to the council reviewers, which are Dr. Shook Mayho and Dr. Edith Parker, to reflect on the Centers Program and these questions. I'll put them back up, and then I'd really like to open this up for a much broader discussion. Okay, so discussion of the sliding scale. Some questions that we've been thinking about and would like to have some conversation around is, should we continue the current sliding scale strategy for an additional 5 years to see whether their initial hypothesis as far as increasing that base is realized? You really can't do that unless you have, get a competitive renewal and then had it for 5 years and then come back in again. Should we go back to a single award amount? So prior to the sliding scale, everybody received the same amount of money regardless of how much NAEHS support or grants that they were supporting by the center members. Before the sliding scale, we also used to treat new centers differently from existing centers. They basically got 50 cents on the dollar, and the level of funding was for fewer years. Should we think about implementing a sliding scale that's based more on the number of EHS grants and number of center members having those ESS grants? For example, currently we require the 3 grants from 3 distinct center members. Should we have a sliding scale that shows increment of, as you increase the number of center members and grants, that could affect sort of the base amount of monies that you get? And if we did something like that, what is reasonable as far as different kind of levels that we have. As far as on the translational research, we've already talked about that. The IHFC began in 2006 and really focused the centers on thinking about translation of research into clinical and public practice. When we instituted, the structure of the IHFC was pretty much left to the grantees to develop as needed to meet their center goals. And over years, we've heard some grumblings like, really, what do you want to see and how should we really structure this? And we've been pretty reticent to tell you what to do because it really is dependent on the kinds of science that you support, the kind of members you have, and the best way to do that. We've already talked about that the translational framework was rolled out in 2017, has really kind of given a blueprint. We've had trainings at core center meetings over the last 2 or 3 years to really have sort of talked about that. And so I wanted to have a moment to sort of reflect. Should we retain, as a question to all of you, should we retain the required IHFC as that entity that supports translational research? Or should we provide more flexibility to the core centers for implementing translational research? I want to say from the outset, we are totally committed to translational research. I think that's really for the future and the impacts that the centers can make in the field. How we get there, would like to have some additional questions. I think we have more tools now to be able to think about that within the center's program. And with that that conversation, I now would like to turn over the conversation to Shook, May, and Edith.
Thanks so much. I think you've shown the data. I think these centers are the impact in advancing environmental health sciences as well as the area of community engagement and translation have been profound. So glad to see that this will continue onward. And I also just wanted to make a note and note my appreciation for the attention that continually NAEHS has done to evaluating implications of changes that they make, including the tier funding, although we acknowledge that it's been a difficult task to show that with different metrics on the baseline, et cetera. In terms of the sliding scale, I think, and you've brought this up, some of the aspects that I think have troubled folks in the past have been sort of, could it be that a sliding scale actually inhibits expansion of research? Because it could be that those institutions that could best benefit from the added resources of a center to sort of spur on research are not the ones that will get it, so that maybe the rich, so to speak, get richer. And I think the valuation data, while it suggests that pilot grants went up, I mean, there's a lot that you could tease out of why that may or may not have happened, and if it was directly related to that. So, I won't be one who says, let's go back to the old ways and have a fixed amount for everyone. But I think if we did go with a tier, and tweak it in a way, I like the idea of having number of grants instead of money because of the difference of types of researches that may kind of confound looking at money and not number of grants. But I would like to think that going forward that we would pay attention to CEC and what any potential implications of a tier system have had. Certainly for the lower, that we know there are at least 2 centers that had 80,000 rather than 100,000. And for the increase up to 1.3 million, I don't think there was a corresponding increase in CEC funding, and one would think just that there might be more CEC activity if you were increasing the research funding in terms of translating. So I think it's crucial to think that part through. I think also if the emphasis on translation, CEC is going to be very important going forward for that. I like the idea that excuse me, I didn't have my notes quite organized, so it's sort of seeming stream of consciousness, but hopefully I'll hit these. But I do like the idea of emphasis on translation, and particularly the flexibility. I think we have many great examples of how people have made the IHSFC really work well, but I think given some flexibility around the mechanism for translation may actually come up with some creative ideas that we haven't thought about in the past. And I think the flexibility, if we do go to a modified tier system, of some of the things you've mentioned would be great. I think changes of allowing other institutes where NAEHS may be a secondary, and also thinking about pilot grants going forward. I will say back to CEC, I think sometimes centers may be more reluctant to give funding for CEC-related activities, if that may result in even if it does result, say, in external funding that may be more foundation or, say, EPA, something that wouldn't be counted. So you have to think about the disincentive that might be part of that. So I think those are big. I mean, overall, I'm very pleased this will be continuing. I think I could be convinced that a modified tier might be good if we thought about the considerations that I've raised.
So I really concur with what Edith just said. I'm going to have a couple of points. First of all, I think emphasizing on the pilot project grants is very important because those seed monies are critical to bring in new projects. Whether 25% or 20% is the right number, so I think it's up to debate. Second of all, I think it's important to think about investing in people. So investing in like junior faculty or kind of transitional into independent type of faculty is critically important. Whether you put that in the program is up for debate, and it's your design, and the current design is, I think, will work in many centers. Number 3 is related to the sliding scale, which everybody is just like back and forth. I think the thinking about using both number of grants and people is important. So I have some suggestions. Like, for example, you can say the new applicants could have a slightly lower bar. Like, for example, 3 independent PI holding whatever number of grants would be fine. As the renewal or the continuation, competitive renewals, then I probably will favor like at least like 3 PI with 5 grants, holding 5 R1 or any kind of types of grants, or maybe at another level, if you do want to get it up there, will be 5 PIs with 7 grants or something like that. So you can have both people and grants. So this is pretty much modeling after the NCI, like how they kind of work on the have them. The reason why in some cases that you only have 2 centers that makes the $1.3 million award in the last 5 years is perhaps those are the places where you also have the Superfund Research Center. And they will really be pushing it up to that level because NAEHS does not have PO1s, so it's difficult to have the large grants. Then finally, I really like to expand the so-called IHC core into something that you can describe it in whatever, maybe the different ways on translational cores that will encompass a lot of things, including perhaps clinical, public health, you mentioned policy, and potentially some new technology and commercialization. I think commercialization is important to actually be pushing it a little bit up forward. So those are a couple of my comments. Thank you.
Okay, are we going to open it up for general comments? Bob?
So thank you, very nice presentation. So as I'm actually a P30 PI, and it's probably the most important grant in my department because it funds the pilot grant program. But to get to your questions on the sliding scale, I think the sliding scale is good. But as Shook May noted, I think the way, the focus on dollars, as you said in your slides, is I think an overemphasis, and it creates problems. Like in R21, it has to be perfectly timed. Otherwise you can't count it in your calculation. Also, it doesn't measure engagement of the PIs. Like some of these grants may have been, some R1s may have been funded by the center, went to NHLBI, became an R1, but it counts 10%. And you may have an investigator who never comes to meetings, is completely disengaged, but has an NAEHS grant that counts 100%. So if there was some way, and I don't know off the top of my head what that way is, but to count engagement, whether it's a former pilot grant or something, in that calculation might actually be a better measure of the actual impact of the center.
Okay, Robert?
Yeah, I also strongly support this program, and I really like the comments about making the research translation component really that, rather than even though the RFA describes the wealth, the breadth of things you can do in integrated healthcare, I still think many have thought about translation in a traditional way. And I really want to echo the point about technology development and the impact that can have. And that gets completely lost by most of the reviewers who have been kind of programmed to think in terms of this traditional clinical translation. So I think that could help a lot, and I think the impact would be huge. In terms of the dollar counting, I certainly agree. I've always viewed the creativity of the researchers who really want to advance environmental health sciences and find any resources to do so, and I think they should be rewarded. So folks who go after the EPA or CDC or other programs that really allow them to implement some of the ideas that originated from the program, they should be rewarded because, as we know, the budget is often flat within a given institution. So asking the investigators to go out and find other resources, I think, should be encouraged rather than discouraged.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Lynn?
This is Terry Kavanaugh calling.
Okay, Terry, and then...
Hi.
Go ahead.
I very much support this idea. I think this is a great idea to move forward with these changes. One thing that I think that might also be included is in the pilots program could actually also have some requirement for match from the institution. Some of the centers do that, and it seems to be a successful way of really getting additional bang for the buck out of those.
Okay, thank you. Lynn?
Yeah, a couple of comments. I very much support the program. I think that it has been of critical importance to the overall field. Even though I've been in an institution that had a center, my current one does not, but regardless, I think that we all benefit from this program. I think, in terms of the sliding scale, I wouldn't talk about it as an incentive to go out and get the grants. I think that institutions are highly incentivized to get NIH funding, and that a little bit of tweaking and how much is in the center grant is not likely to change that one way or the other. Whether it's 700,000, a million, or 1.3, we are so highly incentivized to go after that funding that I could see other bases for a sliding scale. I think that larger operations that have more engaged investigators, more trainees, probably need more pilot awards, So I think, thinking about other metrics in terms of what the grant is intended to support, but it certainly isn't. I don't think it's necessary to add one more carrot, to all the carrots that are already there for going after those grants. The other thing I would say, and just thinking about some of the P awards that we do have that are like this and in other areas, that it is pretty common for the NIH to expect some kind of a commitment, from the institution, matching somehow, whether that's administrative costs or something, So, and I don't think that's unreasonable for the NIEHS to expect. We all do it for the other institutes that are far wealthier than the NIEHS. So I think that's worth considering. I also think that it's worth considering having a different tier for new centers, and which is also very common, So, our CFAR first was a developmental CFAR, and our CTSI was first developmental, and that can be a way of expanding the universe, and especially if you're hoping to spread your influence out into other parts of the country. I don't think just geographically, but I think also other kinds of institutions, that it's well worth considering. The other thing I will say, and this is going to sound harsh, but many of the other programs are far more competitive in terms of the possibility that you lose a center if you don't stay right on top of your game. That they're not by us considered to be entitlement programs. I mean, just having had one for a long, like the CFARs turnover all the time, the CTSIs turnover all the time, and we feel very pressured to stay on top of it and not just make an initial commitment, but to remain committed. And I think that NIEHS needs to, hold our collective feet to the fire in the same way. And in that, the centers should feel that they are constantly, under pressure to stay at the top of their game, and that others may come in, and that's okay.
All right, thank you for those comments. I just want to say that we, in the past, have had lower thresholds for new centers, and we have had P20 developmental centers that have grown on. So, at different times, we've done things different ways. So it is, and we talked about this before Claudia's presentation, that we might, as we change some things, we might revisit some of the things that we've done in the past. So thank you for bringing that back up. Katrina, and then if that's the last one, we'll call for the vote.
Thanks again for excellent presentation. And I know you're over time, but I was curious if you could say a little more maybe later about one of the rationales for the sliding scale initially that you mentioned was the opportunity for ancillary center activities. And I wondered if you could expand a little bit more about what you've seen along those lines. I'll ask my other questions now before you respond to that. Sure.
So just really briefly, so that initially part of it was institutionalizing an administrative supplement program that could have a set amount of money to promote like intercenter collaborations, which is something we have in fact done. Another piece of it that we talked about really hadn't been able to realize was actually competing revisions to expand the reach of a center to bring in other, maybe less research intensive colleges or universities within the area to help build up an environmental health science base. And so our thought was if there was more flexibility in the money that we might in fact be able to do more in reaching out and broadening the scope of the centers.
Great. Okay, thank you. So I guess in terms of presenting the results of the evaluation, maybe highlighting some of those, because at least from my perspective, those collaborative supplements have been extremely productive and powerful. So that is an important ancillary center opportunity. So also recognizing the challenges of evaluation, where you really need to evaluate the counterfactual. I wonder if when you looked at the effects of the sliding scale, and you said only 2 centers have been affected, there may have been a chilling effect, right? There may be many institutions out there that chose not to apply because that lower threshold wasn't worth the trouble to have a center. So I think when we're looking at the data we really need to give close attention to the counterfactual and the things that we can't see. And the other one that we can't see is really the internal dynamics that have been shifted by those criteria. And I encourage you to do some qualitative research of looking deeply at all kinds of stakeholders about whether and how centers have invested disproportionately in activities that are going to lead to NIEHS funding. And obviously, I'm most sensitive to what that does to CEC and engaged related activities. And just logically, it would be very chilling. So particularly wondering how you've evaluated the impact of these guidelines on the CECs. As you know, many of them are populated by social scientists who are all into multi-method evaluation, and I do think that spending some time interviewing your stakeholders from all aspects of the CECs would shed some really useful light on that. So also along the lines of the CECs, the cost of engaging a community is a fixed and non-substitutable cost. So it doesn't cost less money to engage a community because there happens to be less NIEHS-funded research in that community. So that just doesn't seem logical. Also, the cost of engagement, although everything has got more expensive, those are non-substitutable costs. So I would argue, although overall costs have stayed the same, we should always consider whether investing more in CECs would be important because it's less possible to replace those costs from other sources. Also, that I know that the $100,000 a year is a minimum, but it's widely perceived that that's a set amount or a maximum. So the more you can do to communicate that. Yeah. We welcome more contributions, and that is something that is valued by reviewers, would certainly be helpful. Because of the special nature of the centers where they are devoted to a research theme, right? Not solving an applied local problem necessarily. I also think it's really important to always emphasize the 4 audiences for engagement. So a lot of the examples that we see and we hear about and that we understand intuitively is when there's a local community with a problem that informs research there. And that is something that I strongly support and love engaging in and is in many ways the most rewarding. But because the nature of generating knowledge, there isn't always a match between those two things. And I think it's incredibly important that our communities can be local, they can be national, they can be based around an ethnic group that is all over the country or a disease community. They include government, and that is particularly important in this day and age, and K-12 education and healthcare providers. You highlighted the example of vaping, right? Vaping is of concern all over the country. It may be of particular concerns to particular areas, populations, and communities, but they may not happen to be based in the places where basic research on vaping is happening. So I think it's really important for this particular program to emphasize those 4 audiences whenever we're talking about them. And then finally, I also appreciate the idea about matching expectations of other institutions, but if we consider that, I think we really need to think thoughtfully and deeply about the potential disparities that could raise, because some kinds of institutions in some areas are much more able to offer matching funds than others, and we certainly don't want to make the rich richer because we are expecting more of our host institutions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I think we're going to have to pull this to a close. We can still talk about it over lunch, and I'm sure Claudia will be happy to hear your thoughts either at the break time or tomorrow, or just send them by email to us, and then we will consider them as we continue to work on this. But so I'd like to have a motion to approve the concept for the continuation of the P30 program. Okay, I think we got some seconds going here. All right, and remember to vote by raising your hand, and we'll count. And then later I didn't even call the vote yet, and your hands are already up. How exciting. To approve, all those who are in favor? Okay, on the telephone?
In favor.
Thank you.
Sean, in favor.
Okay, great. And any opposed? Right. Any abstentions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Claudia, and thanks for the good discussion. So we ran a little bit over. It's now 12:15. I think what we should do is have an hour and 15 minutes for lunch and come back at 1:30, and then we'll continue, and depending on how the conversation goes, we'll either have a break or shorten the break and maybe run over just a bit after 5 o'clock for today. Thanks, Claudia.